I rolled my Toyota Camry to a quiet stop in front of our house, a modest two-story that Camille and I had built together over the years. The low rumble of the engine faded, leaving just the hum of suburban silence. My fingers tapped on the steering wheel, caught between excitement and exhaustion from the conference I'd just left. It had wrapped up early, a pleasant surprise that meant I could be home a day ahead of schedule and surprise Camille. After 14 years of marriage, it felt good to have a small element of spontaneity. As I killed the engine, my gaze fell on an unfamiliar car parked in our driveway, a sleek Audi that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Next to Camille's practical sedan, the polished car looked almost out of place. Maybe Linda from next door got a new ride, I thought. But even as the excuse formed, it felt hollow. The house was still as I entered, with only the soft sound of my bag hitting the hardwood floor to break the silence. I paused, straining my ears. Upstairs, faint voices reached me, muffled, barely audible, but unmistakably there. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a creak that seemed to echo louder than it should. Camille's voice drifted down, playful and soft, speaking words I'd once thought were only for me. "I can't wait to see you tonight, baby. It's going to be amazing." The words hung in the air, sharp and piercing. I felt my chest tighten. This couldn't be real. Not after everything we'd shared over the years. A dozen explanations flickered through my mind, each one flimsier than the last. Yet with each step up the stairs, the reality sank in deeper. Reaching our bedroom door, I took a steadying breath and pushed it open. Camille was there, seated on the edge of our bed, her phone pressed to her ear, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her expression changed in an instant when she saw me, shock, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. "Daniel," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." "Clearly," I replied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. The room spun, the familiar surroundings suddenly seeming foreign. I held my gaze steady on her, trying to understand the stranger in front of me. "Who were you talking to, Camille?" I asked, barely containing the shake in my voice. Her face hardened, and in a flash the surprise turned to defiance. "It's none of your business, Daniel." Her tone was icy, foreign. "None of my business?" The words came out louder than I'd intended. "We've been married for 14 years. You're my wife," I said, a cocktail of pain and disbelief brewing within me. She scoffed, rolling her eyes in a gesture so dismissive it felt like a slap. "Did you really think I'd stay satisfied with this predictable, boring life forever?" The words hit like a punch. I felt myself stagger back, her statement ringing in my ears. "What are you saying?" Even as I asked, I knew. I just needed to hear her say it, to confront the ugly truth directly. Camille's laugh was sharp, biting, a sound I'd never associated with her before. "I'm saying that I've found someone who actually makes me feel alive, someone who doesn't live their life so cautiously." She tossed her hair back, her expression a mix of pity and superiority. You're having an affair." The words felt bitter in my mouth. "Affairs are for bored people who feel trapped," she said coldly. "I'm just living, and tonight, I'm going out to live some more." My thoughts whirled. The betrayal, the rejection. It all felt too surreal, too sudden. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. I'd been a good husband, faithful, supportive, loving. Where had it all gone wrong? "You can't be serious," I managed, my voice hoarse. "You're not actually going out tonight?" Camille laughed again, the sound grating against every nerve in my body. "Sorry, but I made a promise, and, unlike you, I actually keep my promises." Her words stung like a fresh wound. "If you walk out that door," I said, my voice tight with barely contained rage, "our marriage is over, Camille. 14 years. Gone." I meant it as an ultimatum, a last line in the sand, but deep down I already knew it was futile. Camille shouldered past me, pausing only to grab her purse from the dresser. "Maybe you should have made those 14 years count for something," she said, each word laced with venom. And then she was gone, the door slamming behind her with a finality that reverberated through the house. I stood there, frozen in our bedroom, the space around me suddenly taunting me with its emptiness. Her laugh, now a ghostly echo, seemed to linger in the air, a reminder of how quickly the life I thought I knew had crumbled. As the reality of it all sank in, I felt my legs buckle. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, our bed, and buried my face in my hands. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? A car engine revved outside, breaking through my spiraling thoughts. Camille's car, or maybe that unfamiliar Audi, roared to life and then faded into the distance. She was on her way to whatever wild night she'd planned, leaving me alone with nothing but the shattered remains of a life I'd thought we'd built together. Sleep was a foreign concept that night. I lay in our bed, no, my bed now, staring at the ceiling while the minutes bled into hours. Each tick of the clock on the nightstand seemed to taunt me, reminding me of my new, unwelcome solitude. My thoughts circled endlessly, each one landing back on the same painful question: how long had this been going on? By dawn, I had hardly moved, but the burning frustration inside me was anything but still. I dragged myself to the bathroom, catching a glimpse of my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at me was barely recognizable, hollow-eyed, jaw rough with stubble, hair unkempt. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping the shock would clear my mind, but it did little to dispel the fog of disbelief. Downstairs, The house was silent. No coffee brewing, no soft clinking of Camille's spoon in her cereal bowl, no easy morning chatter about the day ahead, just a vast, quiet emptiness. I tried to ground myself in routine, pouring a cup of coffee, though the bitter taste felt flat, uncomforting. My eyes wandered around the kitchen, the place where we'd shared so many mornings, plans, and dreams. Every part of it now felt tainted, like some cruel reminder of the lies I hadn't even known were there. My hands shook as I took another sip, and I knew I needed answers. Real answers. And I knew where to start looking. Camille's office had always been her space, a room that she meticulously kept organized. Out of trust, or maybe naivete, I'd respected her privacy. Now that respect felt like a joke. I took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping into a world that was as familiar as it was foreign. Everything looked just as she'd left it. The neatly organized desk, stacks of documents carefully arranged, personal mementos decorating the shelves. I pulled open drawers, shuffling through papers, looking for anything, something, that would explain how long this had been going on. At the bottom of her filing cabinet, hidden under a pile of old tax documents, I found it, a set of credit card statements, each one showing charges Camille had kept hidden from our joint account. I rifled through them, my heart sinking as the list grew longer. Expensive restaurants, boutique hotels, lavish gifts. The earliest charges dated back months. This wasn't some sudden fling, it was a long-term deception. Jesus, I muttered, sinking into her office chair. My hands trembled as I held the proof of her betrayal. It felt like a physical blow, as though each date and charge in front of me was a fresh wound. Just as I thought I'd reached the end of what I could stomach, something else caught my eye. A faint glow from under a stack of papers on her desk. With a grim sense of inevitability, I lifted the papers to reveal a burner phone. It felt like a bad movie cliché, the kind of thing you only read about, but the sick feeling in my stomach was all too real as I turned it on. The screen lit up with a cascade of text messages, each one more personal, more revealing than the last. There they were. Pet names, private jokes, plans for rendezvous, an entire hidden life unfolding in front of me. The name in those messages was hauntingly familiar. James Hendricks. Camille's co-worker, the man I'd shared drinks with just last Christmas, who had laughed at my jokes, clapped me on the shoulder, called me buddy. He'd looked me in the eye, knowing all along what he was doing behind my back. Images rushed back. Camille's sudden need for extra hours at work, the way she and James had shared those casual laughs at the holiday party, moments that had seemed innocent until now, it was all there, in the details I had overlooked. Each friendly smile exchanged between them had been part of their private joke, a joke at my expense. The room spun as I tried to absorb the extent of their betrayal. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick, heaving until there was nothing left but the hollow ache in my gut. Slumped on the bathroom floor, leaning against the cool porcelain, I felt a strange, unexpected calm settle over me. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder, harder, anger. I'd spent years teaching my students about resilience, about facing hardship, about standing up for what's right. Now, it was time to take my own lesson to heart. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone. I had calls to make and plans to set in motion. Camille might have walked out on us, but she wasn't about to take everything. Not without a fight. By morning, I was still slumped at the kitchen table, staring blankly at my phone screen. The house around me was eerily quiet, with only the occasional creak breaking the silence. I'd already decided to call in sick. I wasn't ready to face my students or anyone else for that matter. My job, my life, everything I had known felt like it was hanging in the balance. The phone buzzed suddenly, jolting me from my thoughts. It was Mike, my oldest friend and a lawyer, who had been with me through every rough patch since college. I'd messaged him late last night in a haze of desperation, half expecting he'd ignore it until morning. "Hey, Dan, how are you holding up?" His voice was gentle but serious, grounding me as I tried to collect myself. I laughed bitterly, the sound coming out harsher than I'd intended. "I don't know, Mike. How would you feel if you found out your wife had been lying to you for years?" There was a pause on the line, and I could feel him weighing his response. "Listen, I know you're hurting, but we need to approach this carefully. Have you confronted Camille again since last night?" "No," I said, shaking my head, though I knew he couldn't see me. "She didn't even come home last night." "Good," Mike replied. I could hear the relief in his voice. "Don't confront her until we have a solid plan. For now, just focus on gathering everything you can, texts, receipts, bank records. We need to build a solid case." As he outlined the next steps, a sense of purpose began to solidify within me. This wasn't about saving the marriage. That possibility had vanished the moment Camille walked out the door. This was about survival, about coming out of this with my dignity, my finances, and my future intact. "What about the house?" I asked, my eyes drifting to the framed photos on the walls, the memories we'd built over the years. "One step at a time," Mike said, his tone practical but compassionate. "First, we document everything. Then we'll tackle the bigger pieces, the assets, the accounts. But Dan," his voice softened slightly, "are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we start, there's no turning back." The question gave me pause. For a split second, I imagined reconciliation, Camille coming home apologetic and tearful, and the two of us finding a way to move forward. But the vision shattered as quickly as it came, replaced by the memory of her callous laughter and defiant words. She'd made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. "I'm sure," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "She threw us away. Now I have to do what's right for me." After hanging up, I got to work, filling my morning with a single-minded focus that felt oddly freeing. I printed records, saved messages, copied every document I could find. It was like piecing together a case study, only this time the subject was the destruction of my own life. Hours melted away in a blur of paperwork and planning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone buzzed with a new text. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. The lie was so bold, so casual, as though she thought I was still in the dark. For a moment, I was tempted to send back a cutting reply, to let her know that her cover had been blown. But Mike's words echoed in my mind. "Don't confront her yet. Build the case. Be smart." With a deep breath, I set the phone aside, resolving not to let Camille's betrayal control my actions. Tomorrow, I'd return to my classroom, face my students, and continue teaching them about the great upheavals of history, all the while quietly building my own revolution, preparing to dismantle the life we'd built and forge something new from the ruins. As night fell and the house settled into its quiet rhythm, I stood by the window, looking out at the empty street. Somewhere out there, Camille was with him, living her wild life, while I waited in the wings, unseen and unnoticed. Let her have her fun, I thought. The reckoning would come soon enough. With a final, resolute glance at the street, I turned away and headed back to her office. There was still plenty of work to do, and the night was young. The Daniel Marks who had left for that conference only days ago was gone, replaced by a man strengthened by pain, hardened by betrayal, and ready to fight for what remained of his life. A full week had slipped by since Camille's betrayal shattered my world, and every day had felt like a surreal balancing act between maintaining some facade of normalcy and executing the quiet preparations to sever our life together. Each morning I forced myself to go through the motions, shaving, brewing coffee, and staring down my students as if my personal life wasn't a wreck dot. The red circle around today's date on the calendar seemed to taunt me. It marked the day I'd been planning to take Camille out to celebrate our anniversary. The thought now felt ludicrous. Still, it symbolized something: the end of one life and the start of another. As I rinsed out my coffee mug, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the kitchen window. The face staring back looked foreign: haggard eyes, stubble that hadn't seen a razor in days, and a hardened expression that hadn't softened once since that night, Dot determined to start the day with purpose. I grabbed my keys. The first stop was the bank, where I intended to withdraw exactly half of our joint savings. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting myself. If Camille wanted her new life so badly, she could have it, just not at my expense. The drive to the bank passed in a blur of what-if scenarios. What if she'd already taken everything? What if she was steps ahead of me, gutting our finances while I was still reeling? The thoughts made my stomach churn, but the teller's calm expression as she processed the withdrawal reassured me that I wasn't too late. I took the cashier's check with a sense of grim satisfaction. It was one of the first solid moves I'd made in this new, unwanted life. From there, I drove straight to the real estate office. I had a standing appointment with Sarah, an agent who'd been referred to me by Mike. As I stepped into the office, she greeted me with a warm smile that faltered slightly as she took in my appearance. "Mr. Marks, are you doing okay?" she asked gently, eyes soft with concern. I forced a smile, one I hoped conveyed reassurance. "Just a rough week, Sarah. You said you had some properties to show me?" She nodded, pulling a folder from her desk. "Absolutely. I've got a few options that might suit your needs. You mentioned something modest? A fresh start?" A fresh start. The words landed like a punch to the gut, an unintentional reminder that my life as I knew it was over. I took a steadying breath and nodded. "Yeah, that's exactly what I need." Sarah flipped through the listings, explaining each one, but my mind drifted as she talked. I thought about the house Camille and I had shared, the home that was now stained by lies and betrayal. Every corner of it held memories that had once meant something. A kitchen where we'd cooked together, a living room where we'd curled up to watch movies, dreaming of a future that now seemed laughable. "Mr. Marks?" Sarah's voice pulled me back. "I think this apartment might be perfect for you. It's small, rented month to month, no long-term commitment, exactly what you described." I studied the listing, the image of a modest, clean apartment with a view of a nearby park. Something about it appealed to me. It was simple, unburdened by memories. "I'll take it," I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. She blinked, surprised. "Are you sure? Don't you want to think it over? Maybe discuss it with your wife?" The question sliced through me, each word a reminder of the lie my marriage had become. "That won't be necessary," I replied, my voice tight. "How soon can I move in?" An hour later, I found myself standing in that small, empty apartment, key in hand. The bare walls seemed to echo with possibility. For the first time in days, I took a deep breath and felt a trace of peace. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Mike. "Everything's set. Let's move forward with it." I replied with a simple, "All done." There was no turning back now. When I returned to the house, the silence felt different. It was as though the walls knew what was coming. I moved through the rooms deliberately, gathering the last of what I'd need for the transition, while each object I touched felt loaded with memories. Bittersweet or outright painful, none of them bringing any comfort now. I was almost finished packing when I heard the familiar crunch of tires in the driveway. My heart pounded as I steeled myself for what was coming. I positioned myself in the living room, spreading the divorce papers out on the coffee table like a declaration of war. I heard the click of Camille's heels approaching, her keys jingling in the lock. My pulse thundered, but I kept my expression neutral as she walked in. "Daniel!" Her voice was laced with surprise. "What are you doing sitting here in the dark?" I flicked on the lamp, watching her blink as her eyes adjusted. She looked at the papers on the coffee table, her expression quickly shifting from surprise to annoyance. "What's all this?" "Divorce papers," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I think it's time we stop pretending, don't you?" Her laugh was sharp, disbelieving. "You're kidding, right? You're not actually going to divorce me?" "Oh, I'm serious." I picked up the stack of papers I'd organized meticulously. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, all evidence of her betrayal laid out in black and white. I handed them to her. "Or do you want to explain these?" She scanned the papers, her face growing pale. "You went through my things?" she hissed, indignant. "How dare you? How dare I?" I could hardly believe her audacity. "That's rich coming from you, Camille. How long has this been going on? How long have you been—" I could barely finish the sentence, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "Seeing James?" Her anger flared, and for a moment I saw something in her expression that looked almost like shame. But it passed in an instant, replaced by that same defiance. "You don't understand anything, Daniel. James and we have something special, something real." "Something real?" I shook my head in disbelief. 14 years, Camille. 14 years of trust and commitment. Or was all of that just a lie? For the first time, I saw her mask slip. A flicker of something crossed her face. Regret. Maybe even guilt. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. Her shoulders straightened, and she looked at me with cold determination. "You want the truth? Fine. I've been unhappy for years, Daniel. You and this safe, boring life. It's suffocating. James makes me feel alive." Each word hit like a knife to the gut. But I forced myself to stand there, expressionless, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing the hurt. "I hope it was worth it," I said, my voice low and steely. "Because you've just lost everything. The house, our savings, I'm taking half of it all. It's only fair, don't you think?" Her face went white. "You can't do that. I won't let you." "Oh, I already have." I gestured to the papers on the table. "It's all right there. Maybe you should have your lawyer look them over. Although I suppose James might find that a conflict of interest." Camille's confidence cracked. She looked around the room as though searching for an escape. "This isn't fair, Daniel. You can't just throw away 14 years. I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm. "I didn't throw anything away, Camille. You did. The moment you decided your vows meant nothing." Her face crumpled, her eyes growing misty. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then I remembered her laughter, her dismissive words. My heart hardened again. "Sign the papers, Camille," I said, voice flat. "It's over." She sank onto the couch, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched, feeling an odd sense of finality. This was the woman I'd once loved, the woman I'd shared dreams with, and now she was a stranger. The confrontation I'd dreaded for days was over. The truth was out, dot. The rest was up to her, dot. The news of our impending divorce spread quickly through our social circle, as these things often do. Friends who once seemed neutral now took sides, and everyone had their own opinions, their own judgments. It was exhausting. Every time my phone buzzed, it was another message, some offering support, others tinged with hesitation, as if they were unsure which side of the story to believe. One afternoon, I sat on the floor of my new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, scrolling through a series of messages. The latest one was from Sarah, a friend Camille and I had known for years. "Hey, Daniel, I just heard. I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do, let me know." I let out a deep sigh and set the phone aside, already drained. My life had become a mess of explanations, accusations, and careful attempts to avoid getting pulled into Camille's twisted version of events. She had wasted no time spinning her side of the story. According to her, she had felt trapped in our marriage, suffocated by a mundane life. She painted herself as the victim, finally finding happiness with James. It was a narrative many were all too willing to buy, casting her as the liberated one and me as the suffocating husband who couldn't keep up. The next message that came in wasn't from a friend, but from Mike, my lawyer. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I laughed, though there was little humor in it. "How do you think?" I replied. "Half our friends think I'm the villain, and the other half are too scared to take sides." Mike's response was quick and firm. "Remember what we talked about. Don't engage. Don't try to defend yourself. The truth will come out in time. Easy advice for him to give, but he wasn't the one watching his life fall apart under a spotlight. After the call, I found myself pacing the apartment, restless. I felt trapped in my own thoughts, caged by a reality I hadn't chosen. Finally, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, needing a change of scenery. As I stepped out, I froze, surprised to find someone standing in the hallway. Linda, my former next-door neighbor, was there, her hand raised as if she'd been about to knock. "Dan," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and concern. "I wasn't sure you'd be here." I stepped back, inviting her in. "Linda, what brings you here?" She looked around, taking in the clutter and half-packed boxes. "I wanted to talk to you about everything that's been going on." Her eyes were full of sympathy, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of relief. Someone who didn't see me as the villain. As we settled onto the sparse furniture, Linda's gaze wandered, taking in the empty walls and unfinished atmosphere of the apartment. "Daniel, I don't know what to say. Camille's been telling everyone, well, she's been saying things about you that just don't add up. I couldn't believe it. Not the Daniel I know." I felt a tightness in my throat, her words stirring something in me. "Thank you, Linda. You don't know what it means to hear that." My voice was rough, heavy with emotion I'd been trying to keep in check. She reached out, her hand resting on mine. "I know it's not my place, but is there any chance you two could work things out? Maybe if you just talked." I shook my head, a sad smile tugging at my lips. "It's too late for that, Linda. She made her choice, and the trust is gone. There's no coming back from this." Linda nodded slowly, her expression a mix of understanding and sorrow. She promised to stay in touch before she left, and I felt a momentary sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there were still people who saw through Camille's lies. But that relief was short-lived. The next day, as I walked into the teacher's lounge at school, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Conversations died as I entered, and people averted their gazes. I poured myself a cup of coffee, aware of the hushed whispers starting up again behind me. As I turned to leave, I overheard two colleagues, heads bent close together. "I heard he was cheating on her for years," one whispered. "Poor Camille, no wonder she left him." I gripped the coffee cup tighter, the words hitting me like a physical blow. I stumbled out of the lounge, barely making it to my classroom before the weight of it all caught up with me. Alone, I sank into my chair, taking deep breaths to steady myself. How had my life unraveled this quickly? How had I become the villain in a story I didn't even know I was part of? The first bell rang, and I sat up straight, putting on the mask I wore for my students. No matter what, I still had my work. I still had my integrity. And as long as I held on to that, I could face whatever came next. But it wasn't just rumors and whispers that clouded my thoughts. The next few days were filled with added tension and uncertainty on the professional front as well. The school district had announced severe budget cuts due to economic strains, and word had spread that staff reductions were inevitable. Every teacher knew that some of us would be let go, but no one knew who it would be. At the emergency staff meeting, the principal, Miss Dawson, addressed us with a somber expression. "As you all know, the district is facing significant budget cuts. We need to reduce staff by 15%. Seniority will be considered, but so will performance reviews and extracurricular contributions." My stomach churned. As one of the newer teachers, I knew my position was on shaky ground. I'd always received good reviews, and my students seemed to enjoy my classes, but I had no illusions about how easily that could change. After the meeting, Tom Halsey, the head of our department, pulled me aside. "Dan," he said, his voice low, "I won't sugarcoat it. You're on the bubble. If you want to keep your job, you need to make yourself indispensable. Take on extra duties, start a new club, anything that makes you stand out." I nodded, the knot in my stomach tightening. "Understood, Tom. I'll do whatever it takes." As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Camille's contesting the settlement. She's hired Jameson. We need to talk. My heart sank. Stanley Jameson was known as one of the most aggressive divorce lawyers in the city, ruthless in his tactics. This was about to get ugly. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into my work, taking on every extra duty I could. I started a debate club, organized a field trip, and even stepped in as the JV basketball coach when the regular coach fell ill. My days were long, filled with an endless list of responsibilities, all to keep myself indispensable to the school. But while I struggled to keep my job, the divorce battle loomed large. Jameson was relentless, contesting every part of the settlement, dragging my name through the mud. It was as though Camille and her lawyer were determined to destroy what little I had left. One afternoon, as I sat in the teacher's lounge grading papers, I overheard two colleagues whispering nearby. I heard his wife left because he was emotionally abusive, one said, her voice low. Can you believe it? He always seemed so nice. You never know what goes on behind closed doors, the other replied. I feel sorry for Camille, having to work with that James guy. Now that everyone knows about the affair. My pen froze mid-sentence, the urge to stand up and defend myself nearly overwhelming. But Mike's advice echoed in my mind. Don't engage. Let the truth come out in its own time. With a heavy heart, I gathered my things and left the lounge, the weight of their whispers following me down the hall. That night, sitting alone in my sparse apartment, I felt the full weight of my situation. My job was on the line, my reputation was in tatters, and the woman I'd loved for 14 years was doing everything she could to ruin me. For a moment, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to let Camille have what she wanted, to pack up and leave, start over in a new town where no one knew my story. But then I looked at a framed photo sitting on my desk, a picture of last year's graduation, with me surrounded by my students, their faces full of admiration and trust. These kids counted on me, respected me, believed in me. No, I wouldn't give up. Camille might have betrayed me, but I wouldn't betray myself or the people who relied on me. With renewed determination, I opened my laptop and began planning my next move. The law office of Branson and Associates loomed ahead, an imposing structure of glass and steel that somehow managed to feel cold and clinical, even from the outside. I took a deep breath, bracing myself as I followed Mike down the long hallway toward the conference room. He glanced back at me, his face serious. Remember, he muttered under his breath as we approached the door. Let me do the talking. Jameson will look for any excuse to paint you as the bad guy. I nodded, adjusting the tie I'd borrowed from Tom Halsey. It was crucial that I looked sharp, even if I felt like a mess inside. Every detail mattered in this battle. The moment we entered the conference room, my gaze immediately met Camille's. For a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Regret, maybe uncertainty, but it quickly vanished as she turned away. Sitting beside her was Jameson, his expression smug and oozing false politeness. Well, Mr. Marks, he began, his tone smooth and condescending, I hope you've had some time to reconsider your position on the division of assets. My client has been more than generous considering the circumstances. Mike didn't miss a beat. His response was calm, professional. We'll have to disagree on that point, Mr. Jameson. In fact, we've uncovered some information that might significantly change the landscape of these proceedings. Jameson's eyes narrowed, and I watched his jaw tighten as Mike slid a manila folder across the table. He opened it, scanning its contents, and I could see the flicker of alarm in his expression. Where did you get this? Jameson's tone lost some of its smoothness as he looked up, visibly shaken. Mike leaned back in his chair, his expression perfectly composed. That's not important. What matters is what those documents reveal. It seems that Camille and her partner have not been entirely truthful about their financial situation. My heart pounded as the implications settled in. During the discovery process, Mike had dug deep into Camille and James's financial records and uncovered evidence of questionable transfers, even embezzlement. It appeared they'd been using company funds to fund their affair. Dinners, hotel stays, gifts. I hadn't realized how deeply entangled they were until that very moment. Camille's face went pale as she skimmed the documents. What is he talking about, Stanley? She whispered, her voice trembling as she looked at Jameson. But I barely heard her. My mind was racing, reeling from this revelation. Not only had Camille betrayed me emotionally, but she'd been lying on a level that could have legal consequences. I'd thought the betrayal was personal, but now it felt far worse, like she was willing to compromise everything, even her integrity, for James Dot. The room dissolved into chaos, with Jameson demanding to know how we'd obtained the information and Mike calmly deflecting his accusations. I sat back, watching it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. For the first time since this nightmare began, I held the upper hand. But that advantage came with an ethical dilemma I hadn't expected. What was I supposed to do with this information? One part of me, a darker part, wanted to use this leverage to end the divorce on my terms, to punish Camille and James for what they'd done. But another part of me, the part that taught my students about integrity and ethics, recoiled at the thought. How could I teach them to be honorable if I used this discovery for personal gain? After the meeting, I paced around my apartment for hours, weighing my options. Eventually, my eyes fell on a photo of my students from last year's graduation. I knew what I had to do. With a heavy sigh, I picked up my phone and called the board of directors at Camille and James's company, submitting an anonymous tip. They could handle the investigation, and I'd keep my conscience clean. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was swift. The company launched an internal investigation, and both Camille and James were suspended pending further review. I tried to focus on my work, throwing myself into my teaching with renewed vigor. I joined every committee I could, led a curriculum review, and even organized a student election to engage my students. It was exhausting, but it kept me grounded, kept me moving forward. One afternoon, Tom Halsey caught me in the hallway as I was leaving a meeting. "Dan, I don't know how you're doing it," he said, shaking his head in admiration. "With everything going on in your personal life, most people would have cracked by now, but you're thriving." I managed a small smile. I guess I just realized that my students, my work, that's what really matters. Everything else is just noise. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, keep it up. When the final staffing decisions come down, I want your name at the top of the list." As I walked back to my car, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. My life might still be in pieces, but at least I was finding a new purpose, something to fight for. A few days later, I heard from Mike that Camille and James had officially been terminated from their jobs. They were now under formal investigation, and any chance of them contesting the divorce settlement was gone. Mike's text was short but to the point. "It's over, Dan. She's accepting the original offer." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of months of tension finally lifting. It was over. Truly over. With the divorce finalized, I signed a new contract with the school, securing my position and finally feeling a sense of stability. I moved into a slightly larger apartment and unpacked the last of my boxes, eager to put down roots in a life that, while different, felt like it was truly my own. One afternoon, as I was grading papers, an idea struck me. I jotted down a few notes, the spark of excitement growing as I considered the possibilities. The next day, I approached Tom with a proposal. "I'd like to create a new elective course," I said, sliding my notes across his desk. "Financial literacy and ethics." Tom raised an eyebrow, a smile playing on his lips. "That's an interesting combination. What made you think of it?" I've realized that so many of our students graduate without a clear understanding of how to manage their finances or make ethical decisions as adults. I think it's a gap we can fill. He considered this for a moment, then nodded. "You know what? I think it's a great idea. If anyone can make finance and ethics exciting for teenagers, it's you." As the new school year began, I found myself standing in front of a packed classroom, students buzzing with curiosity. "Welcome to Financial Literacy and Ethics 101, I began, looking out at their eager faces. "This course is about more than balancing checkbooks and understanding credit scores. It's about exploring the connection between money and integrity and how the choices you make impact more than just your bank account." As I launched into the first lesson, I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't experienced in years. My pain, my experience, they weren't just wounds anymore. They were tools, lessons I could use to help these young people avoid the mistakes I'd seen firsthand. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a life that felt meaningful. Months passed, and I settled into a new rhythm. My class became one of the most popular electives, and I found myself surrounded by students who were eager to learn, to challenge themselves. I started to build new friendships with colleagues, joined a local hiking club, and even took up photography, something I'd always wanted to do but had never found the time for. One evening, as I was grading papers, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was brief but unmistakable. I made a horrible mistake. Can we talk? It was Camille. I stared at the message, feeling a rush of emotions I hadn't anticipated. Memories of our life together flooded back, the laughter, the good times, and, of course, the pain of her betrayal. For a brief moment, I wondered what I would say if we met. But then, as quickly as those thoughts surfaced, I realized I didn't need closure from her. I'd already found it on my own. With a quiet resolve, I typed my reply. No, we can't. Goodbye, Camille. I hit send and immediately blocked her number. Then, for good measure, I turned my phone off entirely. Setting down my phone, I took a deep breath, a sense of freedom washing over me. The shadows of my past were finally behind me. I looked around my apartment at the framed student photos, the hiking boots by the door, the camera bag on the table. This was my life now, hard-earned, honest, and mine. Feeling a sudden urge to capture the moment, I grabbed my camera and headed out to the nearby park, where the setting sun was painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. As I walked, I felt the weight of everything that had happened start to lift. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. Free from the betrayal, free from the pain, free to be whoever I wanted to be. And as I set up my camera, framing the perfect shot, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with possibility and the quiet joy of a life reclaimed. The months that followed brought a sense of peace and purpose I hadn't felt in years. My new class on financial literacy and ethics became a hit, drawing students from all grade levels. Word had spread that the course wasn't just about numbers and budgets, but about real-life skills and ethical choices. I saw them taking the lessons to heart, making decisions with a depth of thought that reminded me why I'd gone into teaching in the first place. It was a crisp fall day, and the students were buzzing with excitement as they filed into the classroom. Today was special. I had organized a stock market simulation, and the students were divided into small groups, each tasked with investing in various companies, tracking their performance, and adapting to the fluctuating market. The simulation had been my way of adding a practical element to our discussions, helping them understand the consequences of financial decisions. The students were in high spirits, and their enthusiasm was contagious. I felt a surge of pride watching them strategize and make calculated choices, discussing not only the financial aspects, but the ethical implications of investing in certain companies. The simulation reminded me that my life had purpose again, that I could still make a positive impact. After class, as the last student lingered to ask questions about a particular company's environmental practices, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Tom Halsey, the department head. He was smiling, his expression warm. "Dan," he began, "I don't think I've ever seen a class like that in all my years here. The kids are so engaged, and it's clear they're learning something valuable." "Thanks, Tom," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. "It's been a rewarding challenge." He nodded thoughtfully. "The principal's been hearing about it too. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but there's talk of making the course a permanent part of the curriculum, even expanding it district-wide." I blinked, taken aback by the unexpected news. "Really? Really?" Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "Keep up the good work. You're making a real difference." After he left, I lingered in the empty classroom, letting the idea sink in. Teaching this course, sharing what I'd learned from my own experiences, and helping young people avoid similar mistakes. It was more than a job now. It was a calling. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my life had direction and that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But my contentment was soon interrupted. One afternoon, as I was packing up my things to head home, I got a message from Mike. "Dan, urgent. Call me when you can." My stomach tightened as I dialed his number. "Dan," he answered immediately. "Something's come up. I wanted to give you a heads up." "What is it?" I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. "Camille is appealing the settlement terms. She's trying to get more alimony," I groaned, the frustration bubbling up before I could contain it. She already agreed to the settlement terms, Mike. This was supposed to be over. I know, he said, trying to calm me down. But she claims her circumstances have changed. With the criminal charges from the embezzlement investigation, she says her career is damaged beyond repair. She's trying to argue that it's impacted her ability to earn. The injustice of it hit me hard. Camille had caused this mess herself, yet she wanted me to shoulder the fallout. So what do? Don't worry, we have a strong case. Just prepare yourself. This might drag on longer than we thought. After I hung up, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, anger simmering beneath the surface. Just when I thought I was free, Camille had found a way to pull me back into her orbit, to disrupt the new life I'd worked so hard to build. But as the initial frustration began to fade, I realized something. She could try to disrupt my life all she wanted, but she couldn't break me. Not anymore. In the days that followed, I threw myself back into my work, determined not to let Camille's actions take away the sense of stability I'd regained. The school year continued, and my course was thriving. We covered topics ranging from personal budgeting to investment ethics, exploring the complex decisions that come with financial independence. The students' engagement was all the encouragement I needed. One evening, as I wrapped up a particularly lively discussion on social responsibility and investing, I received a message from Linda, my former neighbor. She'd been one of the few friends who had supported me through the worst of the divorce. Her loyalty a rare comfort amid the storm of gossip. Dan, are you free for coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up. We met at a small cafe near my new apartment, a cozy place I'd started frequenting in recent months. Linda greeted me with a warm smile, and we settled into a quiet corner booth, both of us grateful for the calm ambiance. "How's everything?" she asked, studying me with a gentle curiosity. I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's been challenging," I admitted, "but I think I'm finally finding my footing. Work has been a lifesaver," she nodded knowingly. "I heard about your new course. Everyone's talking about it. I think it's wonderful that you're helping students learn those skills. Not everyone takes the time to teach young people about things that actually matter." "Thanks, Linda." I paused, feeling a swell of gratitude. It means a lot to have someone who believes in me. Her smile was warm, her eyes meeting mine with an understanding that felt grounding. "You know, Dan, sometimes the hardest things we go through bring out the best in us. It sounds like you're finding a new purpose, and that's something to be proud of." We talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily as we caught up on everything that had changed. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen, as though I didn't have to wear the armor I'd built around myself. Linda's friendship was steady, honest, and it reminded me that trust could still be real even after everything I'd been through. In the weeks that followed, we continued to meet regularly, our friendship growing stronger. She became a pillar of support, someone I could lean on, and I found myself looking forward to our conversations, each one a reminder that life could be simple, comforting, and filled with genuine connections. As winter set in, I found myself more at peace than I'd felt in years. My students had put together a thank you card signed by every member of my financial literacy class, filled with notes about what they'd learned and how it had helped them. Some of them had even started side jobs or planned budgets for their college years. Reading their messages, I felt a surge of pride, knowing I was making a tangible difference. Linda had been right. The struggles I'd faced had forged me into a different person, one who was more resilient, more aware of what mattered. And through it all, my dedication to my students, my work, and my integrity had helped me build a new foundation for my life. Then, one evening as I was grading papers by the window, my phone buzzed with a familiar number. It was Mike. "It's over," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Camille's lawyer reached out. They're withdrawing the appeal." I sat back, letting the words sink in, feeling the weight of the last year begin to lift. "It's finally over?" "Finally," he confirmed. "She's accepting the original terms. There's nothing more she can do." I stared out the window, watching the snow fall, a deep sense of peace settling over me. The fight was over. The endless, exhausting battle that had defined my life for so long was done. And as I sat there, basking in the quiet calm, I realized I was no longer looking back. The past was behind me, and my future was full of possibilities. Dot. That weekend, Linda and I went hiking on a trail overlooking a frozen lake, the world around us hushed and peaceful. We walked in comfortable silence, the crisp winter air filling my lungs, each step a reminder of the freedom I now held. As we reached the edge of the overlook, Linda turned to me, her eyes bright. "You look happy, Dan. I haven't seen you like this in a long time." I smiled, truly feeling the weightlessness she was seeing. "I am, Linda. I finally am." She laughed softly, taking my hand. "You know, I think this is just the beginning for you." Looking out over the snow-covered landscape, the horizon stretching endlessly before us, I felt a surge of gratitude. She was right. This was the start of a new chapter, one free from the shadows of betrayal and doubt, one filled with hope, honesty, and friendships that I knew would last. Dot. As we headed back down the trail, I felt a sense of lightness, each step carrying me further from the man I had been and closer to the person I was becoming. Winter melted into spring, and with each passing day, the memories of the past year felt more distant, like an old book I'd read once but no longer needed on my shelf. My life was mine again, in ways I hadn't anticipated. My class on financial literacy and ethics was officially part of the curriculum, and I was preparing to present my course model to the district in hopes of expanding it to other schools. The satisfaction I felt every day in that classroom was something I hadn't realized I'd been missing all these years. My work, my students, my purpose, it was all falling into place. Linda had become a cherished part of my new life. Our regular coffee chats had grown into long dinners, movie nights, and weekend hikes. She had been a friend when I needed one most. And over time, that friendship evolved into something more, something I hadn't expected but found myself grateful for every day. With Linda, there were no pretenses, no layers to peel back. We'd each seen the other at their lowest and chose to stay. One evening, we were sitting on my balcony, the sun setting over the city in hues of pink and gold. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling with the warmth I'd come to know well. "Dan," she began, hesitating for a moment, "have you ever thought about teaching a course for adults? I mean, everything you teach in your class is something so many people could benefit from." I chuckled, though the idea sparked something in me. "You think there'd be interest?" "Oh, absolutely," she replied, nodding with enthusiasm. "Financial literacy is something almost everyone could use more of, and you've seen firsthand how much it means to the kids. Imagine reaching a broader audience." We spent the rest of the evening brainstorming ideas, and by the end I felt a surge of inspiration. The idea of creating a course, maybe even a workshop series for adults, felt like the perfect next step. It was a way to share the lessons I'd learned, both the practical and the personal, with a wider audience. A few months later, I was hosting my first workshop at a local community center. Linda sat in the front row, her presence a steadying force as I introduced the program. As I looked around the room, filled with people of all ages, I realized just how much had changed. This workshop was the product of every challenge, every hardship, every lesson from the past year. I started the session by sharing a bit of my story, something I'd never have been able to do months ago. I told them about the financial mistakes I'd made, the risks of trusting blindly, and the importance of keeping both integrity and practicality in their financial lives. The room was silent as I spoke, and by the end I felt a strange sense of release, as if the final chapter of that painful time was closing. Afterward, people came up to thank me, sharing their own stories and struggles. It was humbling to see how many others had faced challenges similar to mine. Some of them even asked about future sessions, wanting to know more, learn more. The realization hit me with a quiet but powerful certainty. I was making a difference. As the months passed, the workshops grew, and I found myself invited to speak at other community centers, even at corporate events. I hadn't expected my life to take this turn, but every step felt right. I'd taken the pieces of my old life and built something new, something stronger. One warm summer night, Linda and I were out for dinner, sitting under the stars at a small bistro we'd discovered together. She reached across the table, taking my hand, her eyes bright with that spark that always made me feel alive. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "I think this is what they call a happy ending." I laughed, squeezing her hand gently. I never would have thought I'd find it again, but here we are. She tilted her head, studying me. What would you say to teaching a class on resilience? I think you're pretty qualified at this point. I grinned, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. I'd say I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. As the night wore on, I reflected on how far I'd come. The pain and betrayal I'd felt with Camille were like distant shadows now, lessons I'd learned but didn't carry with me. My life was full again, rich with purpose and the people who mattered. And at the heart of it all was a quiet contentment, a knowledge that I had fought through the hardest time of my life and come out the other side, stronger and wiser. Linda and I continued to grow closer, our relationship blossoming in ways I hadn't thought possible. It was nothing like the infatuation and intensity of my past. With Linda, it was steady, grounded, a partnership built on trust and respect. She was my best friend, my confidant, and every day felt like a reminder that happiness didn't have to come with drama or uncertainty. It could be simple, beautiful, and true. By the end of the summer, my workshops had expanded to a regional level, and I was officially on the school district's board, overseeing the integration of financial literacy programs across multiple schools. The impact I was able to make now was beyond anything I could have imagined when I'd first started teaching. My life wasn't just a reaction to pain anymore. It was a celebration of resilience, growth, and purpose. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a workshop, I noticed a young man lingering near the door. He was maybe in his early 20s, hesitant but clearly wanting to say something. "Mr. Marks," he said, shuffling his feet awkwardly, "I just wanted to say thank you. I've made some mistakes too, and it's inspiring to see someone like you come out on the other side, still doing good." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection to this stranger. "Thank you," I replied. "Remember, mistakes are just steps on the path. It's what you build from them that matters." As he walked away, I felt the truth of those words settle in my heart. I'd built something from my pain, something that mattered. And as I left the community center, the warm afternoon sunlight bathing everything in gold, I felt a peace that went beyond happiness. It was a sense of fulfillment, of knowing that every choice, every hardship had led me to exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, I met Linda at the park, where we often went for walks. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant hues, and as we strolled hand in hand, I felt a gratitude that was almost overwhelming. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, full of purpose, love, and endless possibility. "Dan," Linda murmured, looking up at the sky, "I think you found something even better than a happy ending." I smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. "Yeah," I replied, pulling her close. "This is a beginning." And as we walked together into the twilight, I knew that the journey was far from over. Life would continue to bring its challenges, but I'd face them with the strength I'd gained and the people who stood by me. I had rebuilt my life one step at a time, and with every breath I felt the joy of a future full of hope, resilience, and love. Here's the next story. The persistent ringing of the phone entered my consciousness, bringing me back into the real world and guiding me through the fog of slumber. I reached for the phone, picked up the receiver, and managed to say a short hello. As I tried to wake up, I could hear the shower running in the background. I quickly glanced at the tangled bundle of linens on the other side of the bed. I figured that my partner from last night was probably taking a shower. "Do not hang up. Oh, please do not hang up. We need to talk." The voice on the other end of the line begged me to listen. A long gap, followed by a faceless voice. No, he didn't inquire, but pleaded to know if I was still here. "Yes, I quote, am here. I assume we'll have to talk at some time, even if merely to figure out what to do about this issue." With a muffled sob, the speaker replied gently, "May I come, please?" This area sounded like a scream for rescue. I almost gave up inwardly, feeling as if it was tearing at my heart and soul again. Then the recollection of the previous 3 weeks' misery and terror resurfaced, along with my fury and contempt for those who had caused it. "It is inconvenient right now. Let's do it tomorrow, at 16 o'clock. My response was brief and sharp. I intended to inflict as much anguish on the listener as possible in the hopes that it would alleviate my suffering. Even though I knew it would never help you. "You are not alone." Silence. "Okay then, at 16 o'clock. Silence. I suppose I deserve it. I suppose it's entirely my fault. The phone became silent in my grasp, but I was able to hear the final gasp and sob. I abruptly ended the call, feeling somewhat gratified. Damn, those final words. It is my own fault. How many times have I heard those over the previous 3 weeks? Only 3 weeks have passed since the horror began, falling back into the bed. I listened to the sound of the shower and let my mind wander back to the start of this nightmare. What about the party? Yes, that marked the beginning. At least for me. For them, it began sooner. How much earlier? I had no idea and had no interest in finding out. Yes, a party. It started. Come on, honey, hurry up, otherwise we will be late. Megan's voice sliced through the steam from the hot shower. I'll take the kids to their parents and return in 30 minutes. Try to prepare for my return. It was one of those parties that occurred for no apparent reason. Just a few buddies getting together for a BBQ. Megan went in the door on time. I greeted her with a lengthy, admiring look that encompassed every inch of her delectable physique. A natural honey blonde. Her hair had grown to mid-waist length. They now cascaded about her head and shoulders, casting a golden glow across her stunning oval face. The snug, pale blue tank showed off her 38 breasts, which were held in place by a lace bra. To be honest, she may not have worn a bra. Her breasts were still defying gravity. Of course, I'm sticking out my chest proudly. For the past 8 years, all I've seen of her is a slim waist that conceals the delivery of our 2 children, flowing into a firm, round buttocks and 2 long legs clothed in a short black skirt that reached mid-thigh. At 32. She looked 22, and she knew it. It was an appearance, but anyone who knows my wife knows she has a razor-sharp mind. There's no dumb blonde here. Megan can intellectually compete with the best and generally comes out on top. This is what drew me to her from the beginning. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Megan offered to drive, flashing her vehicle keys in front of me. Please speed up. Remember, we need to pick up Sylvia along the way. Sylvia is Megan's best friend. Although I'm not sure why Megan looks lovely and smart when she dresses to showcase her features, whereas Sylvia turns heads in scant clothing that exposes her shape. Megan appears to be 22 while being 32, and Sylvia, on the other hand, attempts to appear to be 22 despite being 32 as well. They've been buddies for a long time. Megan assisted Sylvia in pulling herself together after her marriage broke down and resulted in a painful divorce 3 years ago. Get together is the essential word. During these 3 years, Sylvia attempted to entice every man she could into bed. Sylvia had established a reputation in our social group. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Megan continued to promote her buddy couples in our social group. Consider her a walking man-trap, which is not surprising given that she has flirted with every man in the group and had success with many of them. I was not even safe. She has flirted with me multiple times in recent weeks. Despite Megan being her best friend, Sylvia has been openly flirting with me, and last night she even begged me to sleep with her. It didn't concern her that Megan was standing next to me. I merely chuckled and remarked, "One hot woman is enough for me." I could never change Megan because I loved her too much to do anything to jeopardize our marriage. To be honest, Sylvia does not appeal to me, despite the fact that she is enjoyable to be around. She's simply not the type of woman I find sexually appealing. Taking a brief look at Megan, I observed a peculiar expression in her eyes as she stared at me, then at Sylvia, before clearing her throat and asking if we wanted another drink. This expression was almost as if she were saying, "Go have sex with her." I do not care. Our sexual rhythm has improved significantly in both frequency and intensity in recent weeks, and last night was no different. We had a terrific sex life before to this. We made love 3 to 4 times per week when the urge struck. However, Megan now initiates it almost every night, often twice a night. Not that I am complaining. The balance between lovemaking and sex has clearly changed toward the latter. I wondered what happened to her as soon as Sylvia departed. I began clearing away the glasses and dishes. Megan returned, having walked her to the door. "Let us leave this until the morrow. I have more fascinating plans," she explained. She took my hand and brought me into her embrace. I was caught off guard and waited a few seconds to answer in kind, knowing the kids were sleeping upstairs. I decided to move the phone into our bedroom on the way to the party. I couldn't help but smile as we drove through the slowly darkening streets to Sylvia's house, anticipating what would happen following the party. God, have I ever been wrong, Dot? When we picked up Sylvia, I took over driving as the two girls sat in the back, whispering and giggling the entire way to the party. Once there, we began circulating, and I didn't see them much until when they came to refill my glass. It seemed to become more regular as the night progressed, but I wasn't concerned. I was able to unwind and enjoy myself as Megan drove home for the first time. The party was in full motion by 10 p.m., thanks to dancing with Megan and Andy's wife, Fiona. I quickly realized I'd drank too much. I decided to calm down my drinking and go in quest of something to eat. Sylvia approached me at the table, holding a new bottle of whiskey, and began hugging me. I need to use the restroom while it is free. That was the best reason I could come up with, and I bolted from the living room. Megan discovered me hiding from Sylvia with Dave and Betty, two of my co-workers. She gave me a fresh glass of whiskey. I stood there for a few minutes before leaving again. Dot, do not tell Sylvia where I am. I spoke behind her as she went away. Okay, Megan replied, waving the glass over her shoulder at me. After a few minutes, the tape began to take effect, and I became tired. I am a joyful drunk. I normally cuddle up and sleep it off, and that's exactly what I wanted to do now. I went to the back porch, cuddled up on the old couch, and shortly fell asleep. I awoke the next morning in bed, feeling Megan next me. Stunned, I gasped. What's going on? It wasn't Megan, completely awake. I locked my gaze on Sylvia's bright smile. Good morning, lover. Are you ready for a repeat? Anyone viewing me would have assumed I'd been stabbed. I hurriedly pushed away from her, attempting to get out of bed, but the nasty blankets became twisted around my legs, stopping me from getting up quickly. I needed time to process what was happening. After gathering my thoughts, I looked around and realized I was not in my bedroom. What happened? Jack? As Sylvia? What am I doing here? Where is Megan in a panic? I sprang out of bed and began searching for my clothing. I found them nicely folded on a chair at the foot of the bed. Megan felt sick and left the party early. I offered to watch after you. I hope I did it, Sylvia said. What do you mean? I asked. The approaching answer has terrified me. I understand you've had a little too much, but don't tell me you don't recall us having sex last night, Dot. She laughed, or rather this morning. I already assumed that you would never stop. However, I will not claim that I am complaining. I stuttered, horrified. But I am married. We cannot. We should not. It's too late for that, love. Now, how about we review before you leave? She offered with a smile. I hurriedly grabbed my clothing and entered the living room to get dressed, Dot. As I slipped on my jeans, I noticed Sylvia enter the room with nothing but a smile on her face. Thank you for last night, love. We should absolutely do it again, she added, bending in to kiss my lips. I managed to avoid her kiss by twisting my head so that it landed on my cheek. At that moment, the phone rang. Sylvia responded, giving me the opportunity to escape unseen. When I was almost to the door, she remarked, Of course, Megan, he is here. I'll phone him now. When I returned to the room, Sylvia handed me the phone and smiled before strolling back into the bedroom, swaying her hips as if welcoming me. Hello, Megan, I began, but then rage came at me over the phone, Dot. Her cry cut me to the core. How could you, you bastard, and with her? I knew you were up to something because of how you interacted with each other. Her voice grew quieter, filled with pain. I do not even want to talk to you. And with that, she hung up. Sylvia returned and put on her robe. Megan doesn't appear very cheerful this morning, Dot. She chuckled as I collapsed into my chair. What did I do? I inquired, not anticipating a response. This was a question for both Sylvia and himself. After falling asleep on the couch last night, I don't recall much of what transpired. Men are men. Megan will comprehend everything eventually. But remember, whatever happens, it's your fault, remarked Sylvia. Now, since you are already in dung. Why don't you go back to bed and have fun? It will continue to cost you dearly. You should at least receive something in exchange. No thanks. I need time to think. I'll go home and try to resolve things with Megan. I hope she will forgive me. Oh, she'll forgive. Simply give her time, Dot. She genuinely adores you. Just do not forget about it, she stated finally after leaving her residence. I questioned what she meant when she stated it would cost me a lot of money. The short drive home did not allow me enough time to think things out, and eternity is unlikely to suffice. When I opened the door, I was surprised to discover a suitcase by the door and Megan seated in a chair, staring at me. There were no tears or grief in her eyes, only a cold, stony expression. Megan, her voice was harsh, squeaky. "You bastard! How could you? Also with my dearest pal. I do not want to talk to you, I don't want to see you until I've thought it over." She paused and pointed to the suitcase. "I've packed your clothes and shaving necessities. Everything is in this suitcase. Go away before I say something I'll regret," she exclaimed, pointing to the door. She hid her face in her hands and began to cry, her composure slipping. "I'm not sure what occurred," I started, but Megan interrupted me with a scream, urging me to go. Go to this woman of simple virtue. Why not pick up my bag and car keys from the nightstand? I left the house and it appears to be a happy marriage. At least that is how it felt. Megan, how can you forgive me? I couldn't forgive myself for betraying my marital vows, once at the door. I turned around and discreetly told my beautiful wife, "I love you," and then shut the door behind me. I drove around the city for a long time before realizing how exhausted I was. We needed to locate somewhere to spend the night. Even though it was only 2 p.m., I felt as if I hadn't slept for days. According to Sylvia, I did not get much sleep last night. I stopped at the first motel I came across. I rented a room for the week. It was easy to settle in. I threw my suitcase in the corner and collapsed on the bed. I quickly slipped into an uneasy slumber. A few hours later, I awoke in a cold sweat from a nightmare. I imagined I was chasing Sylvia through the park. I wanted to leave her, but something about her drew me in. I looked at my watch and noticed that it was just 7 p.m. I felt worse than I did before sleeping. I hadn't eaten anything all day, so I took my cash and started looking for something decent that wasn't fast food. As I passed by the bar, I figured that having a few drinks would help me relax and clear my mind. After 4 glasses of whiskey, I felt no relief. And now I was starting to blame myself for my own folly. How could I? Why did I? What am I? There are so many questions, but no actual answers. I could have accepted this if I had been unhappy in my marriage or had a strong attraction to Sylvia, but neither of these statements was true. I urgently wanted to talk to Megan, to snuggle up in her arms and let it all go. But I knew it was impossible. I'm torn between calling her and not. I backed out and decided to postpone it until the next day. I didn't want to irritate her, so I drank some. Instead, I went to bed and slipped into a coma-like sleep. On Monday morning, I was unable to attend work. I called and explained that I was not feeling well and wanted to take a few days off. This was not an issue because I rarely took time off. However, when I thought about it, I couldn't recall the last time I hadn't gone to work. I called Megan in the middle of the morning, but every time I got to voicemail, the same story played out on Monday and Tuesday. I left messages stating where I might be found, but received no response. By Wednesday, I was ready to head home. I'm worried she'll do something extreme. The guilt grew stronger. What would happen if I lost her? Could I eventually live with myself? I considered suicide as an option. Despite my melancholy and low self-esteem, I remained hopeful that I could win her back. I was willing to do anything to recover her confidence and affection. On Wednesday morning, the motel phone rang, and I answered it, hoping it was her. Megan's voice sounded icy, but not as harsh as I anticipated. "I have made some decisions, and we need to talk. Come home this afternoon." "Yes, certainly. How are you and the children doing?" "We are okay. See you this afternoon." With that, she hung up. What did she decide? Divorce seemed to be the only alternative, and really, I couldn't blame her. My imagination was running wild, conjuring up worst-case scenarios. When I got to the house, I saw and felt, to put it mildly, horrible. Megan brought me into the living area and began talking. "I'm not planning to divorce you, but I have considered it. For the sake of the children, and for the 8 years we shared together, I'd like to attempt to set things right if feasible. But this is your one chance, and it will not be easy." With a weight lifted off my heart, I replied as best I could, "I love you. I will do everything I can to make things right between us." "It's easy to say." Megan said, "But when you hear my terms, you might think otherwise." Once again, there was that peculiar expression in her eyes that I had noticed the night Sylvia offered herself to me right in front of her. "I don't care about the conditions. I agreed on everything, as long as you forgive what I have done to you." I insisted on it. Megan was silent for a few seconds. I noticed her nervously playing with something in her hands, staring at the floor, avoiding my eyes. Finally, she spoke. For starters, you can return home tomorrow, but you must sleep in a different room until I decide whether you can return to our bedroom. I want to forgive you, but the only way I can do so is to exact my revenge. For this, I plan to have an affair. Her comment struck me like a truck, knocking me off my feet and leaving me breathless. I attempted to say something, but she persisted. I haven't chosen who or how it will happen yet, but if I do, I don't want you to interfere, Dot. You must accept it, if you wish to continue living together. Otherwise, we can end things right now. I'll let you know when it's finished. I'm not sure how long this will endure. Would you agree? All I could do was sit frozen to the chair, a huge stone on my chest keeping me from breathing, and an ice hand tearing at my heart. I didn't trust my ability to speak. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized what I had done and what I would have to go through to keep this woman I loved so much. Megan gazed at me for a moment. I thought I saw compassion in her eyes, Dot. Perhaps I only saw what I wanted to see, not what truly occurred. So do you agree or not? This time, her voice was less confident. A sense of worry appeared to sneak in. Yes, I agree, I croaked. I wanted to vomit. I couldn't take it any longer and got up to leave before returning to the motel. I walked to the bar and purchased a bottle of 12-year-old single malt whiskey. If I have to go through this, I will need all the courage I can conjure, even if it's just phony courage. When I arrived in my room, there was a note under the door informing me that my wife had called and wanted me to call back. I threw the bottle on the bed and dialed our house number. I held out hope that she would reconsider, that she would be unable to carry it out. Megan answered the third ring, and I noticed a softness in her voice again. Are you okay? You departed so swiftly that I wasn't sure what to think. I was concerned you'd done something stupid. No, everything's okay. I truly believed it would be better for me to die. But I suppose I'm not man enough for it either. Do not worry about me. Everything will be okay. See you tomorrow. Remember, I love you, but it is entirely your fault. Megan whispered gently before hanging up. I gazed at the silent receiver. Tears trickled down my cheeks. For the first time in my life, I experienced full powerlessness. When I came home, things were tense for the next few days, but at least there was no yelling. The children had no idea what was happening. They behaved normally, and we tried to do the same for them. I returned to work on Monday, but I was having difficulty concentrating and my productivity was deteriorating. Dave observed this and inquired multiple times whether I was all right. I did not want to admit what I had done. I explained that it was only the aftermath of the illness I had suffered the previous week. He appeared to believe it, but he continued to monitor me on Thursday after the kids had gone to bed. Megan called me into the kitchen to deliver some bad news. Everything is scheduled for Saturday evening. I requested the parents to babysit. Megan mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Steve is arriving at 6 p.m., and we'll need some privacy. You can remain in your room or leave. Steve? Is Steve Adams actually a member of the club? Not him, Dot. My appeal sounded sad to me. Steve Adams was a well-known women man. His accomplishments were legendary. He was the masculine counterpart of Sylvia. You pledged to accept my choice. You now have no right to vote. Megan cut off my protestations with these remarks. On Friday during work, she stood up and went into her room. I was so wrapped up in my self-flagellation that I couldn't even complete the most basic tasks. I informed Dave around 11 a.m. that I was going to the mall for an early lunch since I had some work to finish. Perhaps some fresh air can help. Walking into the center, I realized I needed coffee, and the greatest coffee was at Clyde's Cafe. Everyone went there, so I did too. Looking through the window before entering, I was shocked to see Sylvia at one of the tables. She was the last person I wanted to see. I was going to leave when I observed Megan approaching her table, anticipating that things would get ugly. I decided to stick around in case I needed to intercede. To my amazement, Megan kissed Sylvia on the cheek and sat down next to her. They chatted and joked for half an hour before leaving together. I wasn't sure what to think. I returned to work thinking about what I'd seen. Everything appears that they made everything up and are now blaming me for everything. Unfair. But I was in no position to complain. Megan made it apparent that she no longer wanted to discuss things with me. Seeing them together reminded me of old times, and a glimmer of hope appeared in my heart. If they can make peace, Megan and I may be able to as well. Saturday arrived all too fast, and I was assigned the task of transporting the children to their grandparents while Megan prepared for Steve's visit. She went around the house fixing her nails, arranging her hair, selecting clothing, and changing them for others. As 6 o'clock arrived, I couldn't take it anymore, so I went into my room and tried to divert myself by reading. As I stood up to leave, Megan reminded me that I had brought this on myself. Several minutes later, I heard Steve arrive. I first heard muffled talks and then laughs. Half an hour felt like an eternity until I heard them go upstairs and the door to our bedroom creaked and finally closed. Now I understood what it was like to wait for the second blow to land. My heart was hammering and my head throbbed with anxiety as I imagined what they were doing behind the closed door. We did not have to wait long. I was emotionally shattered and really wanted help. If I took that risk, they would simply kick me out. I knocked on the door. Betty opened it, looked at me, grabbed my hand, and dragged me into the living room where Dave was sitting. Unable to hold my emotions any longer, I burst into tears. After a few minutes, I came to my senses, apologized to each of them, and stood up to leave. Dave sat me back in the chair and stated, "You're not going anywhere until we figure this out. Now sit down and I'll bring you a drink." When the double whiskey burnt my stomach, I felt a little better and thought that Dave and Betty were in need of some relief. I quote known Dave for 15 years, and he was always a nice friend to me. I slowly conveyed the entire complicated issue to them, culminating in the fact that I forced Megan to do what she did tonight. They both listened to me silently, and when I finished, the stillness was deafening. I noticed Dave gave Betty a look that said, "What are we going to do now?" "Jack, I'm not sure how what you told us was conceivable to begin with. You were so inebriated at the party that you were unable to have sex with anyone." Betty joined in. "You were so out of it that Megan and Sylvia had to drag you to the car to drive you home." I felt dizzy because what they were saying did not make sense. Megan had already departed. She couldn't drive me home. "Are you certain that was Megan and Sylvia?" I asked. "Absolutely," Dave responded. "I even held the door open as they took you out." Betty continued, "Jack, I believe you have been set up." Earlier in the evening, I walked outdoors to rest and sat under the upper terrace smoking. Sylvia and Megan emerged onto the terrace above me, and I overheard them conversing, looking to Dave for support. Betty proceeded. "Sylvia informed Megan that he does not bite even when he is inebriated. Megan replied that we should move on to Plan B. I assumed they were going to set someone else up, probably one of Sylvia's boys. I couldn't believe we were talking about you as all of this began to sink in. The things I was questioning began to make sense. Megan tried to get me to cheat on her, and Sylvia actively encouraged me for several weeks, when I did not give in. They planned to get me intoxicated so she could seduce me. That's why they kept bringing me more drinks that night. Nonetheless, I refused to give up, and they convinced me that I had cheated on Megan. She knew that guilt would drive me to do whatever she wanted, no matter how much I disliked the idea. But why? What did she receive in return? Stupid question. She was receiving it right now, with Steve in our bed. As I continued to think about it, my initial thought was to go home and accuse them of cheating. I was so angry that I knew if I went there, I'd hurt them both. I wasn't going to give them the joy of being imprisoned while they maintained their lives. My initial surge of self-pity gave way to hot, passionate loathing, and finally to controlled rage. I sought vengeance. Dave and I started devising a plan. After promising Dave and Betty to secrecy for the time being, we started piecing together what we knew. They definitely mixed something with my final drink, likely the sleeping medication Sylvia took after her divorce. The bag that was waiting for me at home was already packed, tidy, and clean. I was barely 5 minutes away, not enough time to pack up. Unless Megan packed the night before while helping Sylvia tuck me into her bed. Both women took me to Sylvia's apartment, stripped me, and put me to bed. Megan has always been tidy. She folded my clothes and placed them on the chair. If I had been as intoxicated as they said, I would not have been able to do it myself. And Sylvia most likely would not have folded her clothes in the heat of the moment when they met in a cafe. They did not make up, but instead discussed the next move in the swindle. They simply ridiculed me after successfully deceiving me. Megan most likely listened to Sylvia's stories about her encounters with various males. Clearly, Megan began to wonder what it would be like to have another man and devised a way to find out. Why isn't she just having an affair? Megan understood that if I found out, she would lose everything, including me. She didn't want to take any chances, so she determined that if I felt it was my fault, she could have a good time without worrying about the consequences. Hence the continual reminders that I brought all of this on myself. Megan knew I was a proud person, and she predicted that I would be too embarrassed to tell my friends what had happened. Dave claimed that Steve had been strolling around the club for weeks, implying that he was about to sleep with the woman he had been seeking for several months. He began discussing it before the party, so Steve was aware of everything. He will get what he deserves, just like everyone else. I had little evidence. If I approached them, they would deny everything, accusing me of attempting to blame others. I wanted unequivocal proof, and I knew how to obtain it. First, I needed to ensure that they didn't suspect I knew about their strategy. Dave let me remain the night, and I returned home on Sunday, first calling to ensure Steve had gone. As soon as I stepped in, Megan screamed, "Where have you been?" I was going wild with worry. "You were with her again, right?" She was savvy and took advantage of every opportunity. She knew I wasn't with Sylvia because that was the first location she called. Sorry, I mumbled. I couldn't bear listening to you two do this. So I drove around the city and then fell asleep in my car. She eventually calmed down and walked into the kitchen, while I took a shower and changed clothes. Things remained tense over the next few days, but I was too busy carrying out my plan to be concerned. On Wednesday evening, I wiretapped her house phone and concealed her mobile phone so that she would only make calls from a landline phone, which could be recorded. I decided that purchasing $300 at the local electronics store would be worthwhile if everything worked as expected. On Thursday morning, I called Megan and Sylvia from work. I informed them that I wanted to make peace with both of them. I said that I felt horrible for separating them and that it was my fault that their friendship had suffered. Playing the role of the dissatisfied husband till the end, I informed them that I had made a reservation for Friday night at Bernie's restaurant, an upmarket place on the opposite side of town. I proposed to Megan at this restaurant many years ago. I mentioned that I expected Megan to be busy with Steve on Saturday, so Friday was the only possible day. I even intimated that I had a surprise for both of them that they would certainly like. Yes, certainly. When everyone was asleep, I took the recording devices out of hiding and turned them on. After hearing the recording, I recognized Sylvia's voice when she called Megan to find out what was going on. When I heard their talk, I realized I had all the proof I needed and more. Sylvia, Megan. What are your thoughts? What's he up to? Is he suspecting anything? Megan, no. He's simply furious with me and Steve. And he's trying to make apologies so I may forgive him and never see Steve again. Sylvia, are you planning to see Steve again? How did it go? Was everything as amazing as I said, Megan? I suppose I'll meet him again. Everything went well. The sex was fantastic, but I was disappointed when I discovered that Jack had departed. I assumed he was gone forever, or perhaps he did something stupid and injured himself. I still adore him and do not want to lose him. When he returned on Sunday, I almost told him it was over and that I forgave him, but he appeared so resigned to what was going on that I decided to keep going for a while longer before telling him I had my retribution and it was time to move on. Sylvia. Steve was incredible, wasn't he? He knows how to delight a woman and he has the resources to accomplish it. Megan. Steve was good. Like I mentioned, the sex was fantastic, but I can't say he's a better lover than Jack. I think it's simply something new and intriguing. Also, I know it's wrong. Sylvia. Well, let us see. Remember, you promised me that I may try what Jack had. Tell him you want to see what drew him to me and caused him to cheat on you. Tell him you want him to have sex with you. You continue to keep an eye on Megan. God, I don't think I can watch him do this to you. I know I owe him this, but it will hurt to see it. But I promised. So, since I got what I wanted, I believe you should too. Sylvia, we'll discuss this later. What are you going to wear to dinner? The rest of the chat was about everyday topics. I spent Friday making sure everything was going as planned. I did not want any disturbances. When I returned home early to prepare for supper at the restaurant, I felt a smile on my face for the first time in a long time. "Why are you so happy? You are not out of this yet. Dinner in a fancy restaurant will not make up for what you did," Megan snapped as she headed upstairs to take a shower. I picked up the kids and told Megan that I would take them to my mother's for the night so we wouldn't have to rush home. When I came home, I hurriedly showered and changed into my best suit, hoping to appear spectacular as Megan walked down the stairs. I stared at my children's mother, whom I had once loved to death. I knew this could be the last time I saw her like way, and my heart plummeted. Putting aside the ache, I waved the keys and announced that I would drive the automobile. I informed Sylvia that we would pick her up, but if you are uncomfortable, I can call her a cab. No, everything's okay. Please let her sit in the back. I will sit in the front with you. She played her role until the very end. Unlike the ride to the party, this one was completely silent. When we arrived at the restaurant, we were soon taken to our table. I feigned to order beverages cheerfully in an attempt to impress them. The waiter quickly took our orders, and we chose the nicest dishes. I even ordered a bottle of the finest champagne to toast with. As I handed out champagne glasses, I apologized and said that I needed to check on the surprises. I took a drink of the wine, and the sharpness combined with the bubbles brought back pleasant recollections of happier days. I pushed these ideas aside and said, "I'll be back in a few minutes." 2 people waited for me in the foyer. I sat them a few tables away from us, but close enough that they could respond to my signal. The food was amazing, and the service was impeccable, but I was unable to enjoy anything. The realization of why we were here made me unhappy, and all of my smiles felt forced. The women chose to wait for dessert, so I used the opportunity to refill our drinks. I took a sip from mine and began my prepared speech. The previous 3 weeks have been the most challenging of my life. I blamed myself for my foolishness and conduct, and I would never forgive others. Megan opened her lips to speak, but I interrupted her with a gesture. "Please simply listen now. You will get an opportunity to speak later." As I previously stated, my anguish was unimaginable at times. I even considered death as a possible answer. The women's jaws dropped. I don't think they recognized how much agony they'd given me or how desperate I was. Fortunately, I had amazing friends who helped me get through it. They opened my eyes to the truth. Yes, I now see that it wasn't my fault. Both of you set me up. Both women were taken aback, and Megan finished the wine in one go. I rapidly described what I'd seen and learnt. Finally, I will tell you about the taped telephone conversation. Megan was in deep shock at this point, and Sylvia looked guilty as she took a bottle of wine from the ice bucket. I poured each of us a glass and set the empty bottle on the table, marking the first of my surprises. I took out a small ring box from my pocket and gave it to Megan. I mentioned that I have gifts for you, and this is the first one. Still shocked, she opened the box and discovered my engagement ring. Taking her left hand, I removed both of her rings and placed them in my pocket. "I gave you these rings as a mark of our commitment to one another. You do not deserve to wear them anymore. Maybe Steve will call you. However, I doubt his wife will approve." At that point, a voice was heard at her elbow. "Megan, S right." Megan turned and whispered, "Yes." The elderly man handed her a hefty envelope, informed her that she had gotten the notification, nodded, and then went. I proceeded in a severe tone. "These are the divorce papers that my lawyer drafted this week. You will discover that I have not been particularly generous. In fact, I requested everything imaginable, including custody of the children. All joint accounts were closed this afternoon and credit cards were terminated. We no longer exist as a result of your actions. There's just me after this." Megan eventually broke down and began crying. Huge tears streamed down her cheeks, dropped across her naked chest, and soaked into the neckline of her garment. Her cries appeared to originate from the depths of her soul. "S funny what thoughts come to mind during times like these." I instantly imagined that if she grieved long enough, her tears might ruin this lace bra. I shook my head to get rid of these thoughts. I continued, "Our marriage is ended. I hope it was worthwhile. You can now have sex with whoever you choose without being bothered by your husband or children. Having summoned the final surprise." I continued, "I used your strategies to pack a luggage for you. Not so careful. The most important aspect, however, is attention. The locks on our home are being changed, so if you need anything, please phone ahead. Mary, my college ex-girlfriend, placed the suitcase on the table in front of Megan at that time. Megan instantly raised her head to see her standing next to her. Megan astonished me again by entirely losing the final remnants of color on her face, just when I thought she couldn't be more shocked. No, not her. Thank you, Jack. Not with her. I'm so sorry. But we can put things right. I love you. You should understand that what I did was dumb and selfish. I do not love him. Only you, Jack. Megan, you can no longer object to who I see and communicate with. I interrupted her. I recall telling you the same thing about Steve. What did my dear wife do? She did not listen to me. Mary intervened. Do not worry, Megan. I will take care of him for you. Megan was in agony, and Mary's smile only made things worse. Perhaps she now realizes how much she has hurt me and lost. Smugly, I continued. I do not think Steve will be pleased with you. Dave will give his wife all of the evidence I have gathered. I know she suspected him of cheating, but now she will have all of the evidence she needs. If she has any sense of pride, she will divorce him. But that is her business. After finishing my glass, I collected the bravery for the final act. Sylvia, there isn't much I can say or do to you about your role in this, but this will help to soothe my feelings. I grabbed a bucket of ice and threw it over her head, completely drowning her and spoiling her beautiful clothing. Her squeals could be heard throughout the restaurant, ensuring her total humiliation. I took Mary's hand and turned to leave. I turned around and delivered the last words. Oh yes, Sylvia. The table has been reserved in your name, thus you are responsible for the entire bill. Remember, Megan, you brought this on yourself. As I departed, my eyes flooded with tears. My entire world, including my marriage, fell apart. I dashed out of the restaurant, only to collide with a young couple about to enter. Drunken idiot. I heard the door closing behind me. At home, I had sex with Mary. Perhaps it wouldn't be that difficult to go through it all, but deep down, I wanted it was Megan, and everything was just a horrible dream. Sunday morning had passed, and I still couldn't understand what had happened. Megan was supposed to come at 4, and I wasn't sure what to say or how to respond when I saw her. As I strolled about the home, I realized I hadn't spoken to my children since our breakup on Friday night, and I was yearning to see and hug them. They were the last link between Megan and myself, the latter part of our lives together. I postponed the terrible task of notifying them about our breakup. I knew they'd be devastated. Megan was about to come, and there was the risk of an unpleasant talk or quarrel. I concluded that it was best to leave the children with my parents. As I reached for the phone to call my mother, it rang sharply, frightening me. It took me a few seconds to compose my thoughts before answering the phone. My voice sounded flat and lifeless, much like myself. Yes, Jack. Right. Jack, this is Sylvia. We need to talk. My voice became harsh and hostile. I responded with the only thing that came to mind. Every word conveyed hatred for this woman. I don't have anything to tell you, bitch. I hung up and glanced at her. It wasn't the wittiest or most unique expression, but it did convey the depth of my thoughts, which was the only way I could describe them. A few seconds later, the phone rang again, but this time I let the answering machine take over. Jack, this is Sylvia. Please pick up the phone. I know you are there. Her voice cut through the hiss of the answering machine. She spoke again, imploring. Please, Jack, I need to speak with you about Megan. Her final words struck me as I closed the bathroom door. I felt the wrath rising inside me again. This creature destroyed my marriage, deprived my children of their mother, and set me up. And now she expects me to speak to her. Yes, it wouldn't be true, only if hell freezes over. I needed a shower. Just thinking about it made me feel unclean. I wanted to cleanse her out of my memories. The stress of the prior few weeks had left me feeling drained and exhausted. I'm hoping to rest my tired body and mind a little. I opted to use a hot tub. As I filled the water, Megan's oils and salts were nicely laid on the edge of the tub, ready for her return. Her perfume permeated everything, from the mild whiff of her oils and bubble baths to the stronger scent of her mouthwash. Her distinctive aroma and perfume permeated our, or rather my, bedroom. I felt empty and alone. I missed her laugh and grin. Many couples never have the opportunity to experience the intimacy that we had for 8 years. Now I've lost her, and it's robbed me of the purpose of life. And yet just thinking about her made me enraged, much greater than ever before. The familiar sounds outside the window began to pierce my consciousness. Somebody was mowing the yard. An automobile went by while youngsters were playing in the yard. Steam flooded the room, and as I relaxed, my senses started to grasp what was going on. I relaxed and sank into the water. The water relieved my body's discomfort, and my thoughts returned to Saturday. And Mary, my ex-girlfriend, who helped me get her attention on Friday night, met my immediate demands or, at the very least, assisted me in carrying out my revenge plan. However, it was a hollow victory. Saturday was a rerun, although the sex was less frenetic, and we felt the same level of connection. However, this was not lovemaking, and it's not just sex, it was sex for sex's sake. By midday, we both realized it wasn't going to work. There was no emotion and no fireworks. Even the attraction that once held us together waned. We changed over time. We were no longer the people we were before. Mary was laying beside me on the bed. Smiling, she asked, "Well, what now? Should we shake hands and go our separate ways before things become any more awkward? How do you respond to such a question?" We remained silent for the final 10 minutes, barely glancing at each other. I turned to face her and accepted my reality. She slept in my arms, and I casually fingered the golden hair on her shoulder. There was no doubting that she was remained lovely as she grew older. Her self-confidence and body only improved. I cleared my throat and spoke the obvious. "I'm not sure what to say. It was fantastic, but the spark that existed previously is no longer present. Who knows? Maybe one day I will outlast Megan." I took her face by the chin, pulled it closer to mine, and softly kissed her on the lips. It was a kiss filled with friendship and care, but it lacked the love and passion it formerly possessed, unlike sex with Megan, which was mostly for her enjoyment. My time with Mary was solely for my own gratification. When I understood this, I felt overwhelmed with melancholy. I used it in ways I should not have. I considered her a dear friend, someone who was willing to assist me in my time of need. I'd used it, and now it seemed like I was just throwing it away. My offer of time to get over Megan was intended to relieve my guilt. Even now, I was more concerned with myself than with Mary's feelings. "Mary, I began. She placed her fingers on my lips, silencing me. Her eyes reflected compassion and concern. Her voice was quiet. "Do not mention that. I understand how you feel because I once lost the person I loved with my whole heart." He departed, and I was too weak to fight for him. I moved on, and so did he. I still adore him and would do whatever to be there for him if necessary. But I'm also aware that I am no longer in love with him, just as he is with me. A tear fell from her left eye, down her face, and went beneath her chin. She made no attempt to remove it, instead continuing, "It is time to move on. This was all incredibly precious to me, and I'll always remember it. I desired so much when we were together, but I left you to find it. But when I found it, I realized it wasn't what I had expected." I felt her sigh. "I returned to you thinking you'd always be there. You took me back without asking any questions. I sometimes wanted you to ask them, but I wasn't sure I could honestly answer them. You must have heard rumors, but you were so in love with me that you ignored them." Tears poured easily down her cheeks, and with each drop, her shame faded. "I betrayed this confidence several times, but you've never betrayed me. You never disappointed me like I did. Now it is my turn to reciprocate your affection. I know you're feeling guilty about last night and this morning. That is what I have always liked about you. Your morals. Megan loved it as well. I was willing to battle for you even when I couldn't. You never inquired about what we discussed when we met back then, giving us the solitude we required. But now I think you should be aware of this." I told her I didn't want to hear this. "Mary, you do not need to tell me. You've already accomplished plenty, and I appreciate everything you've done and said. I feel better because of you, and I sincerely cherish you as a valuable person in my life. Please do not interrupt. I need to talk things out so I can feel better." Her voice was firm, leaving no mistake that she genuinely intended to continue. Megan came to warn me, or more specifically, to blackmail me into leaving you alone and giving her the opportunity to be with you. We argued, but I refused. I knew if I asked, you'd take me back, just as always. Megan was aware of this as well, and she planned to slightly change the situation in her favor. She ended up getting me into an even worse scenario. Mary stopped crying and moved back to look me in the eyes. Her face was filled with worry, as if she was bracing herself for what lay ahead. Her voice trembled as she said, I tried to pique Megan's interest in other males by arranging for her to meet the men I was dating. She did not even glance at them twice. It quickly became evident that she genuinely loved you, and more significantly that you adored her. She asked me whether she had given up on you. Will I be able to quit cheating? She started speaking even faster, as if the words were coming out of her like machine gun fire. Yes, exactly. I hesitated before responding, and that was all she needed. She stated that if I have to think about it, then I do not deserve you. Megan stated that she is aware of the treatment I underwent to terminate my pregnancy. She will inform you if I do not leave you alone. Mary's voice fell to a whisper, and I had to listen closely to catch her final words. What quote is the procedure? I had no idea about any of this. I responded, surprised by her statement. I became pregnant while we were together, but found out after we broke up. I was dating a guy from the hockey team at the time, and I was worried that if he found out about my pregnancy, he would abandon me. I went to the clinic only to be with him, yet he still left. Sylvia found out about it and told Megan, I knew you'd be angry, so I gave her you, rather than confessing what I did. Mary buried her face in my chest and sobbed violently. Why? Why didn't you tell me earlier? My world has become even worse. Why do I need all of this? Another surge of self-pity washed over me as Mary lay in my arms, her body quivering with tears. My accusation, as put in words, offended me. How will this affect Mary? I immediately felt regret and resolved to make amends. I merely did what I could. He tenderly stroked her hair and whispered into her ear, I understand and forgive you. You've been carrying this guilt for too long. I'm not sure how I would have behaved back then, but I know that's all in the past, and it should remain so. That happened 9 years ago. Even if you don't want to, now is the time to forgive yourself. I will not leave you. You are too important to me to lose our friendship. Mary threw herself on my neck, hugging me firmly and kissing my face. Her voice contained notes of delight. I've imagined this conversation for years, and I've always assumed it would end with you hating me and telling me you don't want to see me again. That quote why I can't tell you. I didn't expect you to be able to forgive me. Mary paused to collect her thoughts before focusing her attention on me throughout the speech. Her voice gained force that I hadn't heard in a long time. Now listen to me, Jack. Right. If you forgive me so quickly, then you should consider showing the same kindness to the woman you actually love. I shook my head, disagreeing. It is not the same thing. She cheated on me, destroying my trust in her. You and I were not married, and this all happened so long ago. Mary resumed her lesson, firmly dismissing all of my protests. This resolve reminded me of the time she coaxed something out of me. Mary almost always got her way. We both cheated on you, but I cheated more than she did. Every time you've forgiven me, it's time to forgive her as well. If, of course, you genuinely adore her. Time heals wounds, but you recently discovered you're pregnant, so you can't use that argument. It feels as fresh to you as if it happened yesterday. I noticed it in your eyes and felt it in your body. You still want her and not me. She battled for you once. Shouldn't you do the same for her? You're correct. I still love her, at least some of me, but I'm not certain I can forgive her. I know I won't forget, and this will ruin us. No. Your marriage will fail if you do not make an attempt to save it. Of course you will not forget. Neither will she. But you can put it in appropriate perspective. Think about what you can lose and what you can keep. Think about the children and how their needs and emotions may be affected. Her final comments hurt me again, making me feel terrible. Mary, it's not fair to involve children in this. I considered their needs, but how would this benefit them if their parents were continually arguing? Or worse, quit talking completely. What example will this provide for them? How would this benefit them? What if she continues to invite other men into the house? I can't handle it, and I shouldn't. Our chat was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Damn. I wonder who it is. I was not expecting someone to pull on my pants. I got out of bed as I was getting dressed. The knocking persisted, unrelenting and demanding. Okay, I'm coming. Wait a minute. As I walked down the steps, I spoke with annoyance in my voice. I spotted a big shadow behind the frosted glass door. The painted glass produced a sepia tone. I knew it had to be Steve, coming to exact revenge for what I had done. I had already chosen what I would do if a problem arose, and I was prepared. Time and movement slowed as I reached the entrance. I'm bracing myself for the inevitable. Everything started to feel unreal. Steve weighed 30 pounds more than me and was around 3 inches higher than my 5 feet 10 inches. I knew he exercised and played football in college, so he wasn't an easy target. My advantage was rage and surprise. He always assumed I was a wimp due of my placid demeanor, and he didn't expect me to respond strongly. This should have been his undoing. When I opened the door, I noticed Steve. He had a furious expression on his face and had lifted his hand to knock again. However, the blow did not come. I noticed his eyes expand with amazement. I hit him. His surprised expression gave me power over the situation. Get out. You sad piece of trash. If I meet you again, you will receive extra. Mary was standing behind me when I turned away from the entrance. Are you okay? No. I think I broke my arm. My remarks conveyed the pain plainly. A smile formed on her face and she started laughing. What's so funny? Well, based on what I saw, you could say you won points. But some would argue that you both tied. Let me see. I extended my hand to her and immediately knew what she meant. Yes, very funny. But I couldn't help but smile about the entire affair. I'll certainly regret it later, but for the time being, I feel fine. The arm is not broken, but rather bruised, much like your ego right now. Did this assist you? She asked. Not really, but I couldn't avoid doing it. It is a man's thing. You would not comprehend. Mary leaned in and kissed my injured fingers before seizing control of the situation. I'll fetch you some ice for your hand while your ego takes care of itself. Sit down. She set me down on the sofa and walked into the kitchen. When she returned, she gave me a bag of frozen peas. Put this on your hand. It will be useful while you do this. I'll go take a shower and dress. After placing an ice pack on my injured arm, I closed my eyes and snuggled into the comfortable pillows. How did my life change so quickly? I had no idea how I truly felt about everything that had happened in the previous weeks. Emotions followed each other on a whim, triggered by a sound or smell. Each new round triggered new ideas and emotions. Fear, anger, resentment, disappointment. These phrases used to appear empty to me, but now I grasp their actual meaning. How they can affect your life. Unwanted, yet unavoidable. A faint sound drew my attention, and I opened my eyes to find Mary standing next to me. They're paying close attention to me. Her eyes regained the compassionate look that rendered them misty gray rather than sparkling blue. Do you know what you just did? It signifies. When did you hit him? Probably so. They will now file a case against me for beating, and I will be imprisoned. Do not pass past. Don't put $200 directly into the cage. Yes, there is such a chance. But not only that. Her remarks were relentless, demanding that I listen and engage in the conversation. No. What can you see that I don't? I inquired with a sense of helplessness. You've just fought for her. Or at least began to fight. Do not stop now. My mind began to swirl with ideas, and for a minute I was mute. I don't believe so. It was only wrath and disappointment. I fought for myself and not for her. Jack, I know you. You loathe violence. You'd rather run 100 miles than hit someone, especially if you're protecting yourself. But when it comes to safeguarding your family, your unique. You quote V just demonstrated it. However, your stubbornness will prevent you from admitting it. Mary shook her head in irritation and went upstairs. Her beautiful blonde hair swung with each movement. Soon I heard the sound of water singing over the loudness of the shower. I soon heard the sound of water and Mary singing, which drowned out the sound of the shower. What makes her happy? Then, I remembered her most recent confession and my pledge of unconditional forgiveness. Of course, she was glad that our friendship would continue, but she was even happier that she was free of some of the guilt that had haunted her for so long. Her comments reached me quietly, and we all know it's best this way. Yesterday is behind us. Now let us all begin living for what will last forever. I'd heard these lines countless times before, but I never imagined I'd hear them in this setting. Damn it, this woman knew just how to go into a man's soul. Mary returned 20 minutes later, fully dressed and carrying a bag on her shoulder. Would you like some coffee before you leave? I just turned on a fresh one to brew. No thanks. How's your hand? It aches, but everything will be fine. You were correct. I do not think I broke anything. The aroma of coffee permeated the room, reminding me why I made it. My gut constricted and I felt disgusted. Mary leaned over and lightly kissed me. Consider what I stated and don't make hasty conclusions. Please promise me this at least. I promise. My life is currently a complete mess, and I don't want to complicate it any further. The difficulty is that I don't know how to improve it. You'll do what you need to do. Begin with yourself, then move on. When all is said and done, you only have power over yourself. Determine what you want, and then see if Megan fits into that image. If it fits in, she'll have to collaborate with you. If not, I suppose that's the end. I digested her words, recognizing the simplicity of her language. She made it look plausible. Listen, I need to go. If you need me, please call. But first, talk to your wife and let her explain why she did all of this. Allow her at least that much time. Holding her breath, she added, I know you won't like it, but I have to say it. I'm not making excuses for Megan, but how are your acts different than hers? My eyes expanded. What exactly do you mean by my actions? Megan started it all. She cheated on me and planned behind my back. I didn't even see the other woman till she did it first. I nearly screamed in defense of myself. How can you compare my acts to hers? Mary interrupted me with a quiet, calm down. I'm not suggesting you didn't have reasons to be angry or vengeful. I'm suggesting that you both did the same thing, but for different reasons. She lied, conspired, and cheated behind your back. She set you up and caused you a lot of sorrow. You both lied, made plans, and cheated, although primarily behind her back. You set her and Sylvia up. And I have no doubt that they are currently suffering almost as much as you. How could you claim that I cheated? Our marriage has already broken down. It is not the same thing. You are still legally married, which makes your acts wrong. Think about it, Jack. Mary took her luggage and walked towards the door. She opened it, blew me a kiss, and then departed. I sat there, still trying to understand her words. I heard the car door slam and then the screech of tires as she drove away. Coffee did little to settle my tummy. I needed some fresh air. Perhaps taking a run will help. I hadn't been jogging much recently, but it seemed like the proper thing to do. People may accuse me of trying to avoid my troubles. Who knows? Maybe they are correct. At that point, it was simply something that needed to be done. It just took a few minutes to change into athletic clothing. After that, I got into my car and drove to the local stadium. I loathe running in the streets. I always appear to be bragging in front of my stadium neighbors. I was only one of a dozen other runners. I am not just another face in the crowd. After barely 10 minutes of running, I felt dizzy and walked to the path's edge. Maybe I pushed myself too hard at the beginning of the run. I was probably in worse shape than I realized, or the stress of the previous weeks had weakened me. I ultimately passed out, stomach empty, in the surrounding bushes. My entire body shook as tension took over. My legs could no longer support me, so I slid to the ground. After about 20 minutes, the shaking ceased, and I was able to drive home. As I approached the house, I noticed my neighbor peeking out her door. She warmly approached me as I parked and got out of my car. Hello, Mrs. Olson. How may I help you? I asked. Mrs. Olson was 85 years old and had been a widow for the last 4 years, serving as the neighborhood's mother figure. She has taken it upon herself to care for all of us. She didn't meddle in other people's business, but she was always willing to assist when necessary, ensuring that no one was harmed. Jack. Do not worry. I saw everything this horrible man was about to hit you. You were simply defending yourself. That's what I told the cop. Her voice grew several octaves higher as she proceeded to defend one of her own. Which policeman? I asked. He came for a battle. He wanted to chat to you, but you were not home. So he came to see whether I'd noticed anything. Here. He left a business card. He wants you to call him back. As I grabbed for the card, I felt a sensation in my hand, similar to when I collided with Steve. Mrs. Olson handed me a card for a police sergeant from the nearby precinct. On the back was a phone number and a request to call me back as soon as I arrived home. Thanks, Mrs. Olson. I guess I should call him right now and get this over with. After entering the house, I decided to take a shower to clean up before making the call. This gave me time to consider what to say. Mrs. Olson stated that she believed he was going to hit me. I remembered his raised hand, but he had just knocked on the door and was not expecting me to open it so quickly. From her perspective, it may have appeared like he was about to attack me. Well, I'm not going to waste my luck. I will take advantage of it. He picked up the third call. Sergeant Burke is short and sharp. Sergeant Burke, this is Jack Wright. I have received your business card. How can I help? Mr. Wright, there has been a complaint made against you for attacking Mr. Stephen Adams. He alleges you assaulted him without provocation and broke his nose. He claimed you did it to exact revenge on him for sleeping with your wife, despite the fact that you gave him permission. I need to talk with you about this. Can you come to the station? If not, I can come and get you. The threat was rarely addressed. Either arrive voluntarily or in handcuffs. The decision is mine. There is no reason to annoy you. I can come in an hour if that works for you. Come back in 40 minutes. I finish at 5 p.m. and would like to close this case before the end of the shift. He made it clear that he was in command here. Okay, I was already dressed, so it was 40 minutes. I had time to gather my thoughts and arrived a little early. Thank you for arriving so soon, Mr. Wright. I merely need this chat to get the facts before deciding what to do. Please give me your version of events. Steve was correct about sleeping with my wife. I given consent for this. Yes, I did. But I was under pressure when I discovered that both of them had framed me. I gathered evidence and sent it to his wife. She probably abandoned him. I shrugged, emphasizing the final phrase. This afternoon he approached me in a rage, knocked on the door and demanded a meeting. When I opened the door, he lifted his fist as if to strike me, so I hit first for self-defense. He's much bigger than me, and I was terrified. I only hit him once, and I may have broken his nose. Then I told him to go and not come back. Not in those words. But do you understand what I mean? Have you invited him? No. Honestly, I hope I never see him again. Were there any witnesses? I did not think so at the time. But my neighbor, Mrs. Olson, said she heard a knock and went outside to check what was going on. She saw him and can tell you what she saw. How about your wife? Has she seen it? My wife was not present. Strange. Mr. Adams insisted that she was. Not really. My pal came to be with me. My wife is currently living with a buddy. And this friend? His hint was apparent. Has she seen anything? Do not think. She approached the door after I hit him. All she saw was him lying there. I can provide you her phone number if you need it. No, I do not believe this will be essential. I've already spoken with your neighbor and she verified your version of events. You're correct. His wife kicked him out and he admitted he came to settle a score. His words. Sergeant Burke closed his notebook and placed his pen in his breast pocket. Apparently everything is good with you, but he may have breached the law. Would you like to apply for it? No, I really want to forget this entire story. Although I understand that this will not happen, I do not believe it will be forgotten that easily. We appreciate your time. By the way, you appear to have an excellent shot. His nose is simply a horror. Next time, think before acting. You may not be as fortunate with convenient witnesses. He pointed to the door and said, I am confident you will find a way out on your own. I need to finish this report. The gentle sound of keys followed me to the door. When I left the police station, it was already approaching evening. The air was thick with the fragrance of the streets and the buzzing of insects. Summer was approaching, and the weather was warming up, so I was delighted to be wearing light clothing. It was too early to head home. Perhaps we should meet with the kids and tell them about Megan and I's split. No comma. There will be time for this. You now need to sort out your sentiments. Damn, it is Saturday night. There must be something happening in town. Perhaps you can watch a game or join a group. I didn't want to return to an empty house tormenting my brain. I remembered that a billiards tournament was being held in a neighborhood pub, which is not where I usually attend. But who knows, maybe it will distract me from my issues for a few hours. When I arrived home, I parked and walked to the pub. I sat at the bar with a glass of beer and a steak sandwich, talking with the bartender while waiting for the games to begin. It was past midnight when I returned home, covered in a thin shirt and trousers. I barely inserted the key into the lock and walked into the living room. Coffee or bed tiredness forced me to make this decision. I slipped into a deep, comfortable sleep on the couch. I'm not sure how I ended up in bed, but I awoke under the covers, still wearing clothes but without shoes. The beams of sunlight coming through the open drapes caused me to look away from the dazzling light dot. It was already late morning. I realized this right away. Of course, everything is relative to a farmer who wakes up early to milk his cows. 6 a.m. is late for someone on vacation. 10 o'clock is early. As I already stated, everything is relative. I was in hell. I have a headache. My mouth was dry and my tongue had clung to the roof of my mouth. I badly required coffee and headache medication. I spent the next 2 hours attempting to recall Saturday evening. The medications helped a little, and frequent coffee improved my condition to an acceptable level. That's when the phone rang, and Sylvia reminded me of how much misery I was in. My fury subsided as the bath water cooled, and I was finally able to make some judgments. After drying myself off, I put on some clothing without really considering what they were. Taking the phone, I began dialing my parents' number but stopped and hung up. I needed to complete this in person. Calling would just complicate matters for all of us. After closing the house, I got in my car and drove to them. When I parked in the driveway, I noticed my mother's car parked in the garage. Hood up, Dad leaned over the engine, his upper body vanishing into the interior of the vehicle. My mom adores her ancient 1990 Ford. It was the first new car her father bought her, and she refused to sell it, despite the fact that it had long ago fallen into disrepair. Dad repeatedly repaired it, complaining that it was useless garbage and that it was time to replace it with a new one. I believe he was secretly pleased that she still adored the car he gave her. It represented both her and his affection for each other. Raising a family was difficult for my parents. We weren't especially wealthy, and they both worked hard to earn what they had growing up in our household. We didn't always have everything we desired as children, but we always had an abundance of affection for one another. However, there has always been an abundance of love in our family. It was something tactile, subtle, but always present, and being around family, even grandparents, made me feel safe and protected. Unfortunately, all 4 of them went away in recent years, but their memories live on in me. My parents saved everything to pay off the house's mortgage and fund for our schooling, even putting their personal needs aside. Our family holidays were usually brief visits to the beach, and as we grew older, we got summer jobs. This family taught me the virtues of love and respect for others, patience, tolerance, and most crucially, the desire for trust in relationships. In recent days, I have struggled immensely with patience and tolerance. I recall one time when I forgot to do my housework and my brother did it for me. That day, I decided to meet my buddies and told my father where I was going. He asked if I had finished my chores, and I lied. He somehow knew I wasn't telling the truth, and I vividly remember his sad expression when he discovered I lied. He did not reprimand, punish, or deprive me of my independence. He simply shook his head and stated, "I thought you had more respect for me and yourself to lie. If it is that important to you, you are welcome to go." He then proceeded to repair the toaster. I was troubled about this for a long time before I got myself together and came to apologize to him and my brother. His response was characteristic of a father who is calm and caring for his son. An apology is a nice first step, but it cannot undo the damage caused by lies. This will take time and a lot more effort than just words. All of these ideas ran through my mind in a couple of seconds as I parked and exited the car. Dad heard me and came from the depths of the automobile, smeared in oil. When he saw who had arrived, a big smile spread across his face. "Jack, how was your weekend?" "Come inside. I'll go wash up," he remarked, entering the house and yelling to his mother, "Beth, Jack has come. Put on some fresh coffee." My children, as if by magic, rushed forward to welcome me when they heard his voice. I knelt down and hugged them for longer than usual. I needed to experience their affection for me. Amber was 7 and Jack Jr. was 5, at an age where children can express themselves without embarrassment. Picking them both up in my arms, I proceeded to Mom's kitchen while Dad went to the restroom. There's something about mothers that alerts them when anything is wrong. Before you open your mouth. "What happened? Jack? Now I'll pour you some coffee and you can tell me everything." I let the kids play while I got a cup of coffee. "Mom, let's wait until Dad arrives. This is going to be a difficult conversation, and I don't want to go over anything twice." Mom nodded and went about her work. A few minutes later, Dad returned, and I spent the next hour telling them about my final weeks. Both listened intently, occasionally interrupting to clarify points. Mom's reaction was not what I was expecting. I expected her to back me by criticizing Megan, but she instead responded, "Jack, you got into a fight and hit a man. We did not educate you to solve problems through violence. I understand how frustrated you are, but this is not a choice. Upset? This is clearly an understatement." Dad nodded in agreement with Mom before asking a question. "And what will you tell the children? It will be a lot more difficult for them. They won't comprehend." I shrugged. "I'm not sure what to say, Dot. For the time being, they're probably better off assuming Megan was abroad on business. When the time comes, I'll tell them she's not coming back. They do not need to know why." Mom placed her hand on my arm across the table. "If you choose, the children can remain with us for a few more days. We'll be glad to see them, and they're happy here, Dot. This will allow you to talk to Megan and decide what to do next without worrying about the kids." "Thank you, Mama. I knew I could rely on you. I'm sorry I disappointed you and Dad by hitting that man, but I don't regret it. And to answer your second question, yes, I felt better at the time, Dot. Now I am not so sure." Dad cleared his throat. This was a clear indication that he was about to speak something crucial. "It was as much a shock to us as it was to you, son. Megan's actions were terrible and she profoundly damaged you. I understand why you reacted the way you did. Divorce may be the greatest option, but is it the only one? What's this? Is Dad suggesting that I forgive her?" My face must have revealed my thoughts. "I'm not saying you should quickly forgive her and return her. I recommend that you weigh all of your options before making a decision. Contact a lawyer, consult a psychologist, and decide what is best for you and your children. Megan has made big mistakes and will need to figure out how to move ahead, Dot." We talked briefly. The kids played at my feet. Then it was time to depart and meet Megan. After kissing the children, I explained that they would stay with their grandparents for a few more days before I picked them up. Amber asked where Mom was, and I told her she was gone for a long dot. Children, including ours, are quick to accept what appears to be normal. My father's final comment made me think. Remember, Jack? When someone violates your trust, it harms both parties. If you truly love someone, you should give them the opportunity to regain their trust. When we try to exact revenge, we often end up hurting ourselves more than the other person. His remarks would come back to me several times that day and over the next few months. I kissed my mother, hugged my father, and left for home at 4 p.m. There was a knock at the door. I am gathering my courage. I opened it and noticed Megan and Sylvia standing together before I could protest. Megan told Jack, "I hope you don't mind that I brought Sylvia to help with my things. She will stay with you if you wish, but she has something to tell you." I was shocked. Megan and Sylvia both appeared to have had a tough few days. The eyes are dark and sunken, with redness from the frequent crying. The hair is groomed, but without much care. Their makeup was modest, and their clothes appeared to have been worn while they slept. Both appeared 10 years older in 2 days. Surprisingly, I succumbed and allowed them both inside. There, no need to stand there. You can enter. We don't want to give the neighbors any more cause to gossip." Megan gazed about as if looking for something, but she couldn't locate anything. Sensing her alarm, I replied, "Mary is not here. She left yesterday asking, 'Where are the children?' Mom keeps them for a few days while we finalize the divorce and resolve some concerns. The word divorce made both of them quiver slightly. I appear to have already accepted the inevitable. Megan sighed and added, "I was hoping to see and kiss them, but this is one of the issues we will need to discuss regarding your access to the children. I'm not sure I want children to be impacted by the lifestyle you and Sylvia intend to pursue." Sylvia interrupted before I could continue. "Jack, may we just sit down? I need to mention something before you start drawing judgments about our lifestyle without waiting for a response." They sat down on the sofa close to one another. At this time, I saw that they were dressed conservatively in jeans and loose tops. They appeared to be attempting to conceal their sexuality under boring, unobtrusive clothing. Sylvia continued, "Jack, Megan mentioned that I have something to tell you." I attempted to tell you this over the phone this morning, but you hung up and refused to listen. That is why I am here to tell you this face to face, so you cannot ignore me. I recognize that you probably despise me, and I can't blame you. My role in all of this ended your marriage. I quote, "I'll never forgive myself for what I did to you both." Sylvia grew angry and paused to blow her nose into a handkerchief. She set it aside and fetched another handkerchief from her bag, continuing in a quiet voice while spinning the handkerchief in her hands. "You're both my buddies, and I made a terrible mistake, Dot. But you should understand that I never intended to divide you. I guess I assumed you'd be like the other men and accept it if I offered it to you, but you declined. I viewed it as a challenge to seduce you, but no matter what I did, nothing piqued your interest. Sure, you flirted a little, but only to be nice, Dot. It wasn't because you wanted me. This had never happened to me, and I was intrigued by a man who could be so loyal to one woman while rejecting everyone else. What I did is unforgivable, and I will not offend you by seeking pardon." Sylvia requested water, and out of habit, I offered Megan something to drink as well. When he returned with the beverages, Sylvia resumed her confession, claiming that her intrigues prompted Megan to consider a different life. When I returned with the refreshments, Sylvia took a sip of water before continuing. "It was my plan to make Megan interested in another man. I figured if she did this, it would be easier for me to get you into bed. Megan has only said positive things about you since she met you. Husband, parent, and lover." I looked at Megan, but she was still staring at the floor, somewhere around her feet. The drink can was securely gripped in her hands. She looked so miserable sitting there that I wanted to hold her and tell her everything was going to be fine, but I couldn't quote it would be a lie because not everything was fine. It will never be beneficial for her or me. "Jack, you must trust me when I say Megan loves you. I know what we did was terrible, but she now realizes it was a huge mistake. She wants to fix everything. Please listen to her. Give her the chance. I beseech you." This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the opportunity to receive answers. I have a lot of questions and I need answers. Megan will get the opportunity to tell her side of the story. I doubt it will alter anything, but I will listen. There is one condition. She must be really honest. If I detect a falsehood, it will all end right then. I turned to Megan and asked her the questions that had been bugging me since the day this nightmare began. "Why, Megan? Why would you do this to me? To us? Was I really a bad spouse and father? If you wanted to be with someone else, why didn't you just let me know it was over? It would hurt, but not as badly as what you did, My voice was shaking and I couldn't speak anymore. Megan sat, shaking her head and mumbling, "That isn't the point. So what now? Help me comprehend." Megan composed herself before slowly raising her head and looking me in the eyes. Her voice was calm but powerful and determined, which shocked me. "I've never stopped loving you. I understand this is difficult to believe, but it is real. It had nothing to do with you as a parent, spouse, or lover. I accept full responsibility for my actions, and I apologize for any harm I caused you. If I could, I would take it all back. But I can't." Megan took a sip from her drink, possibly to give herself time to consider what she was about to say. Jack, "I understand you probably despise me, and I can't blame you. It all began approximately 6 months ago. Sylvia had recently ended an affair with Steve and was telling me everything. I had heard a lot about him from others, and Sylvia verified that he was fantastic in bed. I became inquisitive and asked a few inquiries. Sylvia continued to remind me of him throughout the next few months, and I began to wonder what it might be like. It became an obsession with me. I tried to forget about it, but every time I saw or heard about him, it resurfaced with new strength. I never wanted to cheat on you, but I couldn't shake this feeling. Her harshness faded, giving way to sadness and gentleness. I can't deny that when we had sex, I occasionally imagined it was him instead of you. Guilt made me want to tell you, but I couldn't. When we made love, it was just you. Please, believe me, I never imagined you would find out. I assumed you would be ashamed of your reported adultery with Sylvia. That you would be grateful for the opportunity to make apologies with me. At least, that was the plan. You know the rest. I just realized how much I wounded you after I watched you leave with Mary." Megan shook at the thought of what transpired on Friday night. "Oh yes, about my treason against Sylvia. Tell me whether you received anything from me that night. Sylvia shakes her head. No. I tried, but it did not work. I gave a sigh of relief. At the very least, this makes me pleased. How many times have I heard you chastise males who take advantage of women? And now you're doing the same thing, if not worse, to cheat on me. I'm not sure if I hate you, but I don't like what you did. Megan gathered her confidence again and continued. Jack, I know I don't deserve this, but could you please give me one more chance to show you how much I love you? Give me an opportunity to earn your trust again. These latter comments reminded me of what my father had stated earlier. Now I was absolutely perplexed. On one hand, I wanted to kick her out into the street. On the other hand, I realized I still loved her and didn't want to lose her. We both needed time to work things out. I cannot forgive you. Megan's face paled as I spoke those words. At least for now. I need time to think things through and sort out my emotions. I'm really not sure what I want to do, if I had to make a decision now. You would have left today. So don't press me to respond. None of the women dismissed the concept that there was yet hope for us. Okay, let's take a break and see what happens when we have more time to think about things. Let us take our time. Megan grasped onto this slender thread of hope. I will pack my belongings and leave. But I have one request. Please give me the opportunity to visit our kids. Do not use them as weapons against me. I shake my head. How could you possibly believe that I'm capable of this? I would never turn children against you. It would cause them too much pain. Megan's reply astonished me even more. You've recently accomplished a number of tasks that I never imagined you could. It quote S, not as though you don't have a cause. I discovered a side of you that I didn't know existed, and I'm not sure I like it. I do not blame you. It's my fault that this aspect of you emerged. There was quiet. Both sides stated everything they wanted. Megan and Sylvia went upstairs a minute later to grab her belongings, leaving me to reflect on her final words. When they returned, Sylvia carried her things into the car while Megan returned to the living room. Jack, could you just put the divorce on hold for the time being until we can decide whether or not we can work things out? I shake my head. No, I believe it is best to continue learning how lawyers work. It will take around 6 months before everything is finalized. We shall have time to consider the future if we have it. If not, it's preferable that we move on swiftly. Megan received my remarks with grief. Yes, I get what you mean. Okay, I have to go. When she turned to leave, I called back. Megan, if you wish, you can go see the kids every other weekend and phone them during the week. Thank you. I'll do so. Kiss them for me and tell them that Mommy adores them. I will inform you in these words. She left Megan. I closed the door and proceeded towards Sylvia's car, my eyes misty despite my efforts to prevent from sobbing. I hardly had time to get into the car before tears streamed down my cheeks. I sat in the passenger seat and shut the door hard. Feeling really upset, I forced myself to stop crying and tried to pull myself together. I was quite irritated. I was upset with Jack for not loving me enough to try to save our marriage. I was upset at Sylvia for putting me in this scenario. But more importantly, I was angry at myself for placing us in this situation by not trusting my voice. Sylvia drove out of the entryway, and I sat looking out the window. Sylvia turned to me as we pulled out onto the street, asking, Are you sure you want to go to your parents? You know you can stay with me for as long as you want, if you wish. I shook my head, whispering between pursed lips. No. I need space and time to figure everything out. I require a neutral location where I can rest. I'm not going to give up on our marriage, even if Jack has. If I'm going to reclaim his trust, I need to show him that I'm not cheating anymore. He trusts his parents. And if they tell him I've never dated another man, he'll believe them. I was angry with everyone and everything. I realized I was being unjust to Jack. He had sufficient reasons to end our marriage. If it had been the other way around, I doubt I would have responded differently. But it was still shocking to learn that he despised me enough to seek a divorce. Mom and Dad had no idea what had happened, so when I came unannounced, they were astonished. I briefly informed them what had transpired. I informed them that I had cheated on Jack and that he was filed for divorce. Dad was perplexed and sought an explanation. What happened? Why did you change? I thought you adored Jack. Dad, I absolutely adore him. I can't answer your questions since I don't fully understand what happened. Please leave it at that for now. Mom, as usual, provided a calming presence in their marriage. Not now. Andrew, there will be time to address everything. Don't you see how difficult it is for her? Come on, Mags. I'll help you with your belongings and get you comfortable in your previous room. Then we will chat. She took one of the bags and proceeded upstairs. As I followed her, I saw how tough it was for her to ascend the steps. Mom, what is wrong with you? You appear to be in pain. She halted at the top step to gather her breath and set her luggage down. Nothing that cannot be attributed to old age, Mags. Your mother isn't getting younger. I hugged her shoulder and squeezed her more tightly. Leave the bag here. I'll take it when I get the other one in the room. Thank you for always being present. As I organized my belongings and moved back into my old room, I began to reflect about the last few months of my life. I didn't want to repeat the trauma of the previous few weeks, but I knew I had to figure out why I did what I did. It was more than just a yearning or need for excitement. There was something more, but I couldn't figure out exactly what. It all began that night at the club, when Sylvia informed me that she was dating Steve. She detailed their closeness in great detail, emphasizing how wonderful a lover he was. I had heard whispers about Steve from other women at the club, and I have to confess that I was intrigued. Before meeting Jack, I had only dated 2 other men who had even less experience than me. Jack was my first long-term lover, and his compassion and care throughout our relationship earned my heart. When the other 2 guys merely wanted physical release, Jack wanted to pleasure me. Putting his needs in the background. Looking back, I know that he always prioritized me and the children, even if it meant sacrificing himself. Before this awful tragedy, I did the same thing for him, but this time I failed him. As the weeks passed, Sylvia kept telling me about Steve. I started to wonder what it would be like to have love with another experienced man like him. I began fantasizing about Steve while having sex with Jack. At first, I felt guilty and tried to push these thoughts away, but I couldn't. My justification was that Jack couldn't understand what I was thinking and it wouldn't hurt him. Furthermore, he was having more sex, which was beneficial for him. My fantasies gradually evolved into an obsession that could only be satiated if I carried them out. Of course, I informed Sylvia of all this. After all, what else do best buddies do? Sylvia gave a grin. Megan, try it. What Jack doesn't know will not harm him, and he will never know until you tell him. Furthermore, he owes it to you after everything you've done for him and the kids. It was just rubbish. But that's exactly what I wanted to hear. As a result, everything made sense to me. I didn't realize Sylvia was doing this to seduce Jack. Looking back, I realize how things were. She still wanted vengeance on her scoundrel husband, who abandoned her for a younger model. To her, every guy existed solely to be used and then discarded, just like they had done to her. If I had recognized this, maybe I could have halted everything before it got out of hand. The plan was the easiest part. I was watching a replay of an old TV show in which a father was persuaded to commit an unlawful act by making him believe his daughter was in danger. In reality, she was safe. It's simply that the entire event was in his head. I assumed that if Jack believed he may lose me, he would do anything to maintain our marriage, including allowing me to sleep with someone else. That is it. The plan was ready. I talked about it with Sylvia, and she suggested trying to seduce Jack. It didn't work, so we planned to make him believe he had cheated on me. I'll admit it. The prospect of Jack sleeping with Sylvia made me jealous. And I nearly gave up on the plan. But the fantasy was too much for me. My passion, the illegality of my plan, and the exhilaration of being a part of the scheme led me to a near sexual frenzy in the final 2 weeks before the party. I was terrified Jack would start questioning why I wanted sex all the time. I should not have bothered. He remained as trustworthy and kind as he had always been. When he arrived home after the party, his face was a mask of pain and I could not look at him. I knew how much I had hurt him, and the worst was still to come. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't tell him the whole truth. To be honest, I proceeded with the deception. Sex with Steve was disappointing, Sex with Steve was solely for his personal enjoyment. I took a secondary position. After a while, I realized why Steve was on his ego trip and trying to make Jack appear terrible by calling him a weakling. I initially backed him, but his behavior gradually irritated me until I couldn't take it anymore. Steve. I screamed at him. We both know Jack had no say in this, but it does not make him a weakling. He believes he is saving our marriage. But anything we do only harms him. If you wish to continue, please quit making negative remarks about my husband. Steve blinked in astonishment and whispered an apology. We persisted, but the joy was vanished. Later that night, I awoke to find an empty bed. Steve had dressed and then gone without saying thank you or goodbye. I felt like a woman with easy virtue. Did he want to leave money on the nightstand as a client? Looking back, it was no better than what I deserved. But in the moment, it made me feel cheated. I needed to take a shower before I chose to speak with Jack and inform him that this was finished, that everything could return to normal. But he wasn't there, so I panicked. I believed he'd departed, but his belongings were still in the closet. I tried calling his cell phone, but it was turned off. So I called Sylvia to discuss. Her advice was to persevere, otherwise he may assume something is wrong, like a lamb to the slaughter. I allowed myself to be sucked deeper into the nightmare. Then, on Friday, everything fell. He knew everything. The divorce papers and his engagement ring were the shocks he had prepared. And Mary, of course, my adversary for Jack, appeared to have finally prevailed. I wanted to blame Sylvia, Steve, Jack, or anyone other than myself, but I couldn't. It was my fault, and only I could correct it. But was it fixable? I wasn't sure, but I was determined to do everything I could to turn things around. During the lengthy night, I made some crucial judgments. First, our friendship with Sylvia ended. We quote, "We've been friends for a long time, but true friends don't do that." I was there for her when she was going through a difficult moment. I supported her during her divorce, and she was always there for me. But then I wondered what type of buddy would do that. Of course, it wasn't all her fault. I let everything happen. I went for it, nearly completely conscious of the consequences. However, she did not maintain her share of our friendship, and it was best for us to split ways. I tried to contact Sylvia to inform her that our friendship had ended, but I was unable to reach her. She did not answer the phone. Her mobile phone was turned off, and she took time off from work. After 2 weeks, I had given up. A few weeks later, I received another terrible surprise. Steve discovered me and showed up at my parents' house on a Saturday asking for me. Mom answered the door, not knowing who he was, and called me when I noticed him. Anger raced through my body. My mother later claimed I turned as white as a ghost. "What do you need?" My voice trembled from wrath. "I hear he kicked you out, just like my bitch wife did to me. I wondered whether you had nothing better to do." His voice had a light-hearted tone. "Perhaps we can meet." Well, you get what I mean. The sneer on his face recalled horrible recollections from that night, none of which were pleasant. Steve, "I am not interested in seeing you anymore. If you were the last man on the planet, I would run as far as possible. Now I'll ask you politely, leave and never emerge in my life again." His face clouded, and the amusement turned to wrath, a cheap woman of easy virtue who thinks too highly of herself. "You got me in this mess, and now you're too good to have sex with me again. This isn't the end. I'll make sure everyone in the club knows you're an easy target." His voice broke before he could complete his threat. "You overheard what my daughter said. Now get lost. If you attempt to carry out your threat, you will have to deal with me." I turned around to see my father standing behind me in his police uniform, his right hand resting on his gun holster. Steve paled, turned back, and nearly raced to his car. "Dad, you should not have interfered. I could have dealt with him myself." He smiled. "I know, but I wanted him to understand that if he messes with you, he would have to deal with his entire family. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Now don't cry. These tears will cause stains on your uniform. The boys at the station will laugh at me. By the way, I have to leave. See you tomorrow morning, Mags. If that jerk returns, please phone, and I will dispatch a patrol car right away." Over the next few months, my life became simpler. Work from home and see my children every other Sunday. On the days that I saw the children, Jack attempted to avoid me by hiding in the workshop or locking himself in his office. He definitely did not want to deal with me, and I couldn't blame him. 10 weeks have gone since our breakup, and I have not spoken to Jack since the first Sunday. How could I solve everything if he refused to see me? I was desperate. My marriage was disintegrating, and I couldn't do anything about it. Extreme times require extreme methods, and when the opportunity presented itself, I seized it with both hands. On Tuesday night, I returned home from work to discover my mother lying on the kitchen floor, moaning in anguish. Her hip and back had been bothering her for months, but she didn't want to tell anyone, and the anguish was so intense that she couldn't disguise it any longer. I hurried to her. "Mom, what happened? Oh my God, have you fallen? What is wrong with you?" She replied with gritted teeth. "Help me up and put me on the sofa, Megs. And next, I believe you'll need to contact an ambulance and your father." I was afraid. I helped her lie down more comfortably and contacted our doctor, who promptly arranged for an ambulance to transport her to the hospital. He said he'd meet us there. Mom never said she felt awful, so I knew it was serious. I should have had her tell me everything when I visited them. Another sense of guilt was added to my emotional weight. We sat and chatted while we waited for the ambulance and Dad. "Mom, why didn't you tell us earlier? Do you realize what is wrong with you? How long have you put up with this?" She raised her hand to interrupt my series of queries. "Meg's not as quick. Give me a chance to respond." "How long?" "Approximately 4 or 5 months. I quote, am not sure what's wrong with me. I merely assumed that was the result of advancing years. I used painkillers, but they are no longer effective. I could not tell you. You have enough difficulties on your own." But I did not want to tell Dad. You know how restless he is. And in general, it's probably nothing. Mom winced in agony, so I changed the cushion to help her feel more comfortable. "This is clearly not the best technique to find out the truth, Mom. Everything would have been a lot easier if you had notified us sooner. Now just lie motionless until the ambulance arrives." Dad and the ambulance came practically simultaneously while asleep. I told Dad what I could as the physicians evaluated and readied Mom for travel. They lay her down on the gurney. Dad leaned down to kiss her on the cheek. "Do not worry, I will be there." His voice cracked. "I will always be with you." Mom winked at him despite his suffering. "I know, sweetheart, and I shall be with you." The hospital was 30 minutes away, and the journey led through some of the city's busiest areas, but we made it there in 23 minutes. At each intersection, we were accompanied by police cars, which slowed traffic for the ambulance. Dad later stated that practically all of the police station vehicles were used. Dad was one of the department's most respected sergeants, and when his co-workers found that his wife was heading to the hospital, they did everything they could to assist. I had a mental image of Moses splitting the Red Sea. It quote, "s funny what you think about under stressful situations over the next few days." My mother underwent various examinations. She received countless injections. Blood was drawn. Each step exacerbated her suffering and increased our fear. I went to see her on Friday and she was unusually quiet. "Hey, Mom, what happened? Did you discover anything bad?" My mother has always avoided discussing her difficulties. "You know, Meg is your dad, and I haven't seen the kids since you and Jack split up. Could you encourage him to bring them to visit soon? Only if you tell me exactly what's wrong with you." She gently said, "I'm giving up." "Fine. They found a tumor on my spine and hip." Mom squeezed my hand, and I saw how feeble it was. Doctors aren't sure if it's benign or cancerous, but if it's removed, it could strike nerves and cause me to lose some mobility. How much will this affect me? They can't say yet. Does Dad know? Yes, he is quite concerned. He blames himself for not pushing that I visit the doctor sooner. Of course, it is not his fault, but he refuses to listen to me. He went for a walk to relax. "Don't worry about him, Mom. I'll take care of him while you heal. Now relax. I will go look for Dad. I'm confident Jack will let the kids come to you. I will ask him as soon as I can." Kissing my mother on the cheek, I left the room, only to return to find her nearly drowning in a large hospital bed. The light blue blanket just highlighted her delicate complexion. When I started looking for my father, I realized that he would blame himself, but I questioned how much of it was my fault. I destroyed my marriage and brought my difficulties to my parents' home. Stress could have been the cause of what happened to my mother. Well, if she wants to see the kids, I need to persuade Jack to bring them. I couldn't find Dad, so I called home, left a message, and went to Jack's place. It was already late, yet the lights were on in the house, and music was playing in the living room. I knocked on the door, waiting for Jack to answer. It seemed weird to knock on your own door. Even though this was no longer my home, there was still a sense of strangeness. Kelly, the girl next door who babysat our children when we weren't home, opened the door. Her surprise was clear in her voice. "Hello, Mrs. Wright. How can I help? The children are already sleeping. She wasn't sure whether to let me in or not. Hello, Kelly. I am here to see Jack. Mr. Wright. Sorry, Mrs. Wright. He is not at home. He is out on business." It was obvious that she was ashamed to tell me Jack had gone on a date. My mother broke the news to me first, and now this. It was all too much, so I turned and fled away, not wanting Kelly to see my tears. I'm not sure how I got home that night. Tears have blinded me. I almost got into an accident multiple times, but I didn't care. I almost wanted to die. The pain was so great that I wanted to curl up into a little ball and hide from everyone. Over the next 3 days, I alternated between wrath and self-pity. Night after night, I went asleep crying and asking the same questions. Why did he do that? How could he have done this to me? During the day, I attempted to stay in front of my mother and father, but they didn't notice because they were preoccupied with their own issues. But the nights were the worst. When I was alone in my room, I had time to reflect and recollect. One night, I awoke from a nightmare in which I was reliving the night Jack and Mary left the restaurant together. In my dream, he said the same words. "You harmed me so badly. It's like if you ripped out my heart." Then I realized that the pain I was now feeling was the same as what I had caused him. It was a huge shock for me to discover how deeply I had hurt him. I didn't fully grasp this before today, but now I do. I only comprehended this because I was now experiencing the pain myself. No wonder he didn't want anything to do with me. The next day, Thursday, I left work early to arrive before him. I wanted to wait for him when he got home. When he got home with the kids, he was surprised to see me seated on his porch. Amber and Jack Jr. rushed out of the car and wrapped their arms around my neck. Jack wasn't too pleased to see me. "Mom, what are you doing here? Will you come home? Please let me know you'll be returning. Hello, children. No, I'm not going back. At least not yet. I need to speak with your father, and then I'll see you in a few minutes." I looked to Jack for confirmation. "Yes, youngsters, you should wash yourself. Amber, you can assist. Jack, Junior, Mom, and I will be in the living room if you require anything. Megan, you should come in. The children dashed into the home, and Jack Jr. sharply informed Amber that he was old enough to wash himself and did not require her assistance. They grew swiftly, and I missed key moments when we sat down on the sofa. I was gripped with anxiety again and started trembling. Remembering that dreadful Sunday, Jack's severe voice brought me back to reality. Megan, what would you like to tell me?" I replied with a forceful voice. "Jack, I have 2 inquiries. The first is that my mother is in the hospital. She recently had back and hip surgery and wants to see her children. I promised to ask you if they could visit her in the hospital. Jack, "S indifference transformed into concern. What happened to your mother? Is she okay? What operation? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "Of course. She can see the children. What transpired between us does not alter my feelings about your parents. You know, I've always enjoyed them." I briefly informed him what had occurred to my mother. Halfway through the chat, he excused himself and went to see what the kids were up to, returning to report that they were playing a new video game he had purchased for them. He noticed how distraught I was and softened. "It appears that you might use some coffee. Wait, I'll handle it for both of us. It will not worry me to return with 2 cups. He sat down opposite me, and I noticed he had removed his tie. "You mentioned you had 2 questions. Yes, there's one more thing, Jack. Now I know how much I wounded you. I finally understand what you have gone through. Knowing you were seeing another woman let me comprehend how you must have felt. I didn't want to know if you were seeing another woman. I simply wanted to die." I paused to take a sip of coffee before gathering my thoughts and continuing. "You asked why I hadn't told you sooner, so I was going to. I visited your place, but you were on a date," Kelly informed me. "Do not blame her. It is not her fault. She simply let it slide once I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I realized what I was feeling was the same thing. I put you through. Listen attentively, Jack. I didn't comprehend where I was headed. Jack, I've already told you that I still adore you. And what I did was an enormous error. Now I realize it was more than a mistake. It was a dumb, selfish deed that cost me the most important person in my life. I don't have any excuses for what I did. I'm not even sure I understand why I did it, but I know I owe you an apology for everything I've put you through. I'm sincerely sorry. I understand that this will not make up for my wrongdoing, but I sincerely apologize. I never imagined you'd go through so much pain. I guess I didn't consider the repercussions. Jack was still unsure whether to trust me. My infidelity made him suspicious, and he was unable to believe me, let alone trust me again. Is this another one of your and Sylvia's schemes to reclaim your place on my list of excellent people? Every phrase sounded like uncertainty. No, I haven't seen Sylvia or spoken to her since we arrived on Sunday. She appears to have disappeared. I tried calling her to inform her that our friendship had ended, but I was unable to contact her. I do not blame you for having misgivings, But whatever I say is from my heart. Megan, you can't just come here to apologize and expect things to be fine. My forgiveness is not easily acquired. You will not succeed in making me feel guilty. As I previously stated, you violated our vows of loyalty by sleeping with Steve. Yes, I have dated other women, but I do not consider it cheating. Thus, I have no need to feel guilty about it. My composure was not affected, and I was shocked at how peaceful I felt after admitting the reality about what I had done. I got control of myself and some self-respect. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Jack, at least not right now. I do not think I deserve it. It bothers me that you date other women, but I understand that you are free to do as you like. I have lost the right to consider you solely mine. I can't stop trying to get you back, and all I ask is one thing: do not close all the doors in front of me. Give me a chance to prove that I am serious. Let me strive to earn your forgiveness. Jack was silent. Jack sat motionless, looking at the floor. His head swung slowly from side to side, and his powerful right hand massaged his unshaven chin. His expression reflected his entire internal turmoil. I gave him the time he required because there was nothing else I could do at that time. Jack cleared his throat. He had caught up the habit from his father. Megan. I honestly don't know. More than everything, I want to be a family again. But I understand that this is impossible. I want to forgive you, but the memory of your actions keep me from doing so. I'd like to trust you again. But how can I accomplish this? Jack stood up and I knew our chat was ended. I quote, "I'll go cook dinner for the kids if you want. You are welcome to talk to them as I do this. You are welcome to stay and enjoy dinner with us. I know the kids will be delighted to meet you." I stayed, and the sole topic of conversation at the table that evening was my mother's illness. The children were disappointed that she was sick, but relieved that they would see her soon. They were too young to realize the gravity of the situation. Jack was concerned for my father and requested me to inform him that his door was always open for them. "Tell your parents that Amber and Jack Jr. are their grandchildren, and I will not prevent them from seeing each other." It was nearly like when we were a family. We ate. I assisted with the cleaning and then put the children to bed. When we came back downstairs, I started getting ready. Jack was just watching me. I really wanted him to beg me to remain, but I knew he wouldn't, even if he wanted to. He could not. He took me to the door and quietly stated, "Tell your parents that I am thinking of them and praying for them. I'm confident your mother will improve. She's a powerful woman who will fight. I'll take the kids tomorrow if it works for you. Yes, it will fit you. She genuinely wants to see them. Just like Dad." Opening the door, I turned back and kissed him softly on the cheek for the first time since we parted ways. He did not back away or cower from my touch. He accepted my kiss but did not reciprocate it. At least he didn't totally reject me. That was something. I was close to my car when he called. "Megan, I had a great time this evening, and I'm sure the kids had as well. Thank you for staying." A faint ray of optimism shone through my dark world, like the first ray of sunshine after a rainstorm. It gave me hope for a brighter future. I was aware that, as with any storm, there would be a lot of cleanup work to be done before things improved. But I was prepared to do whatever was required, true to his word. Jack took the kids to see my mom every day while she was in the hospital. They chatted about joyful moments and the future, but never mentioned our breakup. It seemed like an unspoken rule until Mom got back on her feet. We were all aware that one day we would have to face this. When my mother returned home, I took a leave of absence to stay with her. I divided my time between caring for her and seeing the children. Jack would bring the children to us once or twice a week on Saturdays. I spent the day with them while Dad cared for Mom. As spring evolved into summer, our encounters became increasingly frequent, transitioning from informal dinners to family barbecues. For a few hours, I forgot we weren't a family enjoying communication. The downside was that Jack was still dating other women and did not try to hide it. Megan, we need to chat. We sat in my parents' lawn, watching the kids play near Mom while Dad cooked steaks. I was seized with acute anxiety. Is this truly the end? Is he really going to declare it's over and he's met someone else? Our divorce was progressing quickly, and I anticipated to receive the final forms soon. Okay, Jack, let's go in. I'll ask Dad to watch after the kids so they don't bother us. When we walked in, we sat at the kitchen table. I completely expected him to sit opposite me, but he sat next to me, thoughtfully sipping his drink. He finally spoke when I was twirling a glass of wine in my hands. Megan, this does not suit me. I need permission, but it doesn't come. I date other women, but it doesn't work either. I can't commit to anything, and I can't enjoy it. I sometimes schedule a date and then cancel it. Other times, I go just to have dinner with a girl and drive her home. Almost no date makes it through hearing his words. My heart was full of joy. When I placed my hand on his, instead of moving away, he covered it with his other hand and squeezed it tight. Jack smiled sadly and continued, Megan, I've been seeing a psychologist for the past month to try to get through this. Dave and Betty were extremely helpful, advising me to seek professional help. My psychologist advised me to attend joint sessions to get answers to my questions. I jumped at the chance and said, of course I'll accompany you. Take your time answering. It may not be as you think. It's possible that the responses I receive will help me move forward, but not in your direction. With our divorce nearing completion, I need more clarity, and this is the best way to get it. However, these may not be the answers you seek. I tried to make my smile appear confident, despite the fact that I felt anything but. I understand, but this is what you need. This is the least I can do for you. I'm willing to take the risk. Who knows? Perhaps everything will work out. I'm willing to try. Now let's get back to the kids. As he stood up, Jack smiled and nodded. I followed him outside, avoiding gloomy thoughts. We attended therapy for the next 3 months, sometimes together, sometimes alone. Initially, this was simply intended to be for Jake's benefit, so that he might discover the answers he needed to complete this period of his life. But with each session, I was able to find answers to my issues. These answers didn't make me happy, but they helped me understand why I did what I did, and now Jack understands it as well. Our lives together became basic and almost sterile. The thrill and joy of youth have been replaced with predictable behavior. It came out that I was trying to include something prohibited and hot into my life. Instead of discussing this with my spouse, I took Sylvia's awful advice and trusted her. The psychologist stated that this is not unusual in marriages, noting the so-called 7-year crisis. She also persuaded Jack and me that it was worthwhile to try to resolve our concerns. Guys, I've been listening to both of you for a long time, and I can confidently state that you still love each other. Megan, you're aware of this, but you already know this, Jack. But you have to accept it. I am not saying it will be simple, but it will be less difficult than a divorce you may later regret. She paused to allow us to process what she had said before continuing. Jack, when you first came to me, you were completely distraught. I witnessed you drown in self-pity and depression. Now, look at yourself. You quote, still upset, but your mood has improved. Who or what do you believe is causing this? Without waiting for his response, the psychologist openly conveyed her thoughts. You miss having a complete family life. Those family feasts and barbecues helped you regain some of what you had lost. If it already has that effect, think what it would be like if you could reverse everything. Consider what would happen if you continued to be divorced and lost the happiness you had achieved. Jack agreed and temporarily halted the divorce process to give us more time to overcome our differences. If we didn't succeed, we'd simply sign the paperwork and be done. She was correct. It was not easy. It required another 6 months of discussions and disagreements. Jack would listen, then vent his rage, or worse, get up and leave. But what gave me hope was that he always returned. He never apologized for his tantrums, insisting that I accept them as part of my punishment. Then one day, he and the children vanished. This occurred after a particularly difficult session, when he simply stood up and left. They had been gone for more than a week, and I was becoming desperate. Dad attempted to locate them through his police profession, but to no effect. I even called his parents, but they were either unaware of the situation or refused to tell me. They were nice, but frigid, and I didn't push. I just asked if they had found anything to let me know he was fine. They agreed, but I questioned whether they would actually tell me. Jack had skipped 2 meetings with a psychologist, and I couldn't believe my eyes when I came into our appointment and saw him seated in the waiting area. When I entered, he stood up and approached me, holding my hand and kissing me. A tiny kiss on the lips, rather than the cheek. He appeared different, more confident and relaxed, almost like his former self. I was perplexed and merely listened, practically not participating in the session. Jack did the majority of the talking, explaining where he was and why I was unhappy. After the last meeting, I felt I couldn't go on like this and needed to leave. The following day, I called work and consented to an impromptu vacation, then took the kids and left. We ended ourselves in the mountains, where we hiked, fished, and simply wandered. The kids were overjoyed, and it provided me the time I needed to think things over. I despise what you did, Megan, but I still love you. The kids and I miss you at home. Sheila. He turned to the psychologist. You were correct. Divorce is not an option for us right now. He paused and gazed into my eyes as if searching for something. Megan, I am willing to give us a second opportunity. I know this isn't exactly what you were looking for, but it's the best I can do at the moment. I'd like you to come home, but to the guest room. We should try living together again and see if we can get over it before making a final decision. Sheila beat me to it by only a single second. Jack, are you sure you're prepared for this? We've gone a long way, but there is still a lot of work to do. Perhaps it is too early. I'm sure I should move on. This is the best method to accomplish it. I hope Megan feels the same way. However, this offer is subject to certain limitations. First, Megan must be evaluated by a doctor. Second, if you cheat again, we are done. No second chances. I cannot go through this again. Yes, Jack, it's not quite what I was looking for, but it's a start in the right direction. Before I agree, I need to know what's changed. As previously stated, I had time to contemplate in the mountains. I contemplated life with and without you. I felt happy when I thought about you. When I imagined my existence without you, I felt unhappy, sad, and lonely. One day, I was sitting on the side of a stream, fishing with my kids. Amber landed a little trout and nearly fell into the water with pleasure. I caught her, and it dawned on me, what if I don't make it? She wouldn't have time to spend with you. And I started crying, and the kids consoled me. Amber expressed what we were all thinking. I wish Mom were with us. Then I told her, me too, honey, I agree. And it was true. I truly wanted you to be there with us. Jack looked at me and said the words I had hoped to hear for so long. Megan, I love you. I will not be able to forget, but I believe I am finally ready to forgive. All I ask is one thing, always be honest with me. Tell me what you desire. If you can accomplish that, I believe we can manage it. I was so overcome with emotion that I could barely respond. Only when I was prepared to lose him did I get the second chance I had been yearning for. Yes, Jack, I can handle it. I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Jack shakes his head. No, that is the worst thing you can do. It will simply make me remember everything over and over. I'm looking for a life companion, not a servile slave that exists solely to satisfy me. I came home the next weekend. We had some ups and downs, but they were minor in comparison to what we had gone through. Almost 4 months had gone since my return when Jack welcomed me to his bed. Our first sex was desperate and far from the love I desired, but it alleviated some of our anxieties. Over the next few weeks, we gradually returned to the gentle lovemaking that I had remembered and longed for. That night felt almost like our first time. We sat on the couch watching an old romance movie. Jack's hand ended up on my shoulder and I pressed against him, laying my head on his chest when the video concluded. Tears streamed silently down my cheeks. Jack kissed them, then gently kissed me on each cheek. We peered into one another's eyes and were filled with a passion we hadn't experienced in a long time. That night, lying in Jack's arms. He finally spoke what I had been yearning to hear for so long. Megan will stop hiding in various rooms and away from the children. Come return to our bedroom. We became a full-fledged family again, and I would never risk losing that again. However, one chapter remained unfinished, and it was finally completed a few months after I returned to our bedroom. We heard a car drive into the entrance, and Jack shouted as he entered the house. "Hello, Jack. I'm in the kitchen. We have a guest for supper tonight. I hope you do not mind." "Of course not. And who?" When he noticed Mary and me sitting at the table with our coffee, he abruptly stopped speaking. "Hello, Mary." "What?" He froze, perplexed. I felt it was time to put an end to his agony. "After you told me what Mary had said, I realized I needed to thank her. I knew we were never friends, but I felt obligated to thank her for her assistance in reuniting us." Mary joined in. "Megan came to see me one day and we went for coffee together. Since then, we've met once a week to talk and get to know one another better. Naturally, we talked about it with you," I continued. "We became excellent buddies. I needed a trustworthy buddy, and Mary provided that. I invited her to supper so we could discuss everything together. I hope you do not mind." "No, I don't mind, but it is a little unexpected. I believe I need something stronger than coffee. Perhaps you should have more than one drink. I quote, "V got one more surprise for you. I realize I should have told you this privately, but I can't wait any longer. We will shortly join the family. I'm pregnant. This most likely occurred within the first week of us returning to sleeping together. I resumed taking the medications, but they didn't have time to take effect. I hope you aren't mad." "Angry? What exactly are you talking about? I am in seventh heaven. You are aware of this. I've always wanted a large family." Jack drew me into his arms and kissed me. Then, remembering our guest, he freed me. "Sorry, Mary, but it's not every day you find out you're going to be a father again." And so our lives continued. My mother is fully recovered. She spent almost a year in a wheelchair before starting to walk again. She can now walk, however, she tires rapidly, and one leg remains slightly stiff. However, it's still better than it could have been. Jack's parents were slow to forgive me, and I still have the impression that they are waiting for me to make a mistake again. But this will not happen again, I heard from Sylvia years later. She slipped into a profound despair as a result of what she had done in a particularly difficult situation. She called her sister and asked for guidance. Fearing for her safety, her sister arrived to take her in. Sylvia went through treatment for several years before she was able to move on. She eventually met and married a man, and she now appears to be able to let go of the ghosts of her previous marriage. Although we are no longer friends, she calls me every year on my birthday, and at the end of each discussion she apologizes once more for what she did. She appears to need this to forgive herself every time she calls. I tell Jack about it, and he always answers the same way. Jack is a loving and understanding person, but there are certain things he cannot forgive. Sylvia is one of the few things he can never forgive. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.